everyone. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in this video. Basically, what I'm going to do is review a bunch of movies and a couple of TV shows that I've seen in the last month and a half or so. And I'm just going to review them all. Obviously, got to talk about Godzilla, King of the Monsters. But I'm going to talk about a bunch of other things as well. There will be spoilers. I'm not going to talk about any of these things without talking about spoilers. And I have absolutely no how long this thing is going to go, but I'm assuming I'm going to need to put together a table of contents. So if there's a specific movie that you want to hear me talk about, just check it out in the description. If you want to watch the entire thing, this thing could be maybe half an hour long. It could wind up being 5 hours long. I have no idea how much. It depends on how much rambling I do, and I could end up sounding like an incoherent, crazy person throughout this entire thing. But I've decided to be a little ambitious and just cover all of it, and again, all the movies I've watched, and just to see what happens and give my thoughts on everything. So without further ado, let's get started with this giant mountain that I'm tackling here. Okay, number one movie I want to talk about is Captain Marvel. This is one that a lot of people talked about when it came out. Had a lot of controversy surrounding it. Much to my irritation, because I hate it when, because it's like the 2016 Ghostbusters all over again. I hate it when a controversy kind of drives the film, and most of the time it's just a bunch of people shouting at each other, and they all look like assholes. Like, it's one of the reasons I've kind of avoided talking about this movie, because the whole, like, oh, Brie Larson said this, she's a bitch, and oh, these people are a bunch of sexists, blah, blah, blah. And all I see are a bunch of people just yipping at each other, and everybody's a dick. Like, that's my take on it. And it's like they're all just losing their minds over a movie. It's like, it's kind of amazing to me. But so I kind of avoided talking about the movie for that reason, because I just don't want to get dragged through the shit. But I think enough time has passed, and I won't get hung up by my shoelaces if I give my opinion on goddamn Captain Marvel of all things. But sadly, like, all this controversy surrounding this film, and the film itself is so lifeless and so boring that I'm kind of amazed that it generated any kind of interest at all whatsoever. I would personally put it as the worst of the MCU that I've seen so far, because at the very least, with the weakest of the Marvel movies, and, you know, when you think of the weaker entries, you think of Thor: The Dark World, you think of Iron Man 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp comes up for me. Even with the weaker entries, at least there's a central character that's likable. Like, okay, I like Iron Man, so at least I get to have more fun with Iron Man, even if Iron Man 2 is not that great. Well, with Thor: The Dark World, at least I get Thor and Loki interacting with each other, so that's fun, even if the story is bland as hell. With Ant-Man and the Wasp, I'm like, I don't know, Ant-Man and the Wasp interacting together is cool. I don't remember anything else that happened, but they're kind of cute together, so, you know, okay, cool. With Captain Marvel, she is so wooden that there's nothing, and what really upsets me about it is that the movie itself has many opportunities to make her an engaging or likable character, because we find out that she is been brainwashed basically by the bad guys, and her life is a lie, and she's actually from Earth, and her life was stolen, and it's possible that she's a murderer because she probably killed innocent people on behalf of the bad guys, and all these other things. You know, she lost her friends, she lost her family, and all these other things. All these things that they could have done to really expand on and make her more of a sympathetic character, or give her an emotional reaction to anything, and they don't do any of it. I mean, we come to a point where she realizes that her entire life is a lie, and she's like, oh, so I just shoot different bad guys now. Okay. Or punch different bad guys, I should say. And that's it. And I'm like, all right. So she's just this wooden plank that just moves from one scene to another, and just not a very interesting movie. I guess if I were going to say, like, anything nice about it, the de-aging effects on Samuel L. Jackson were amazing. And he himself was actually the most likable thing in the movie. I guess the cat was kind of neat. I kind of like the cat. I think that's it. I think that's it. Because, oh my god, it's just such a... And I'm not going to sit here and say it's one of the worst superhero movies ever made. Lord knows I've seen worse. I mean, Spawn will always be my number one worst. No matter what anybody says, I'm like, that thing, holy shit, that thing is really, really bad. I can still smell it. This movie is, it's so lifeless. It's almost like if I called it the worst, I would be giving it more credit than it deserves. To me, it was just, I don't know. It was just a boring mess. And to me, with all the talk of like female-led movies and female-led superhero movies, and comparing this film to Wonder Woman, I think comparing the two is insulting to Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman is a vastly superior film in every way. And that movie had one major flaw, and that was like the way they handled the ending, which I think a lot of people have pointed that out, so I'm not really going to elaborate on that any further. But that movie overall was very entertaining, and I loved the lead. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman was absolutely lovable and charming and just adorable. And very likable, and badass too. So she covered all the bases. This is just, she was just so wooden that I couldn't get invested in her. And then at the end of the movie, she becomes all-power God Lady, and she's so powerful that the climax of the movie has no tension at all whatsoever. She is just invincible God Lady, and there's no tension. And yeah, that didn't work. And and one other thing. The scene where Nick Fury loses his eye might be the single worst scene in the entire MCU, and I was absolutely shocked that they allowed it to be put into the film. When I saw it, my jaw dropped. I'm like, I cannot believe that people in Marvel Studios and Disney saw that scene and thought, that's okay, leave it in. I was like, what? And because to me, like, how Nick Fury lost his eye is one of those things we should have never gotten an answer to. And the answer they came up with was completely stupid and kind of undermines the character. But yeah, in this movie, and this has been pointed out as well, but the movie also kind of breaks continuity from some of the other Marvel movies. It's like, I thought Cap was the first Avenger. And when I say Cap, I mean Captain America. His movie's called The First Avenger, but the way this movie's positioned, it makes it look like Carol was the first Avenger and the inspiration for the Avengers. And I'm like, that kind of clashes with the first Captain America movie, but okay. And in the first Avengers, Nick Fury talks about how Thor was like the first alien, I guess you would say, that came to Earth and made them realize how underprepared they were to deal with aliens. I'm like, but then Captain Marvel took place earlier than this, and there was an alien invasion and an alien conspiracy that was covered up, and Captain Marvel is superpowered God Lady that flies into space, and it's like, it's like, wait, so Nick, you're kind of contradicting yourself here. So yeah, I just didn't like the movie. Again, I didn't like fucking hate it, but to me it was very uncharacteristic of what I'd seen from Marvel as far as like with the careful planning. This felt like something that I couldn't believe it existed in the MCU because it was felt haphazardly put together, and I was just really surprised by it. But and I bring up Captain Marvel because when I talk about Endgame, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but I hoped that maybe interacting Captain Marvel with the other Avengers would bring something out in her and make her more likable, because I'll be honest, I was not the biggest fan of the first Doctor Strange movie. I was kind of like, it was alright, and I didn't like how Dormammu was executed. It was okay, I guess, but I didn't like fall in love with Doctor Strange, and I didn't feel like the movie took full advantage of just the crazy premise that it had. I just thought it was okay, and again, a few years after I saw it, I'm struggling to remember things about it. It just didn't leave much of an impression on me. But once they interacted Benedict Cumberbatch with Thor in Thor Ragnarok, and then again with Tony in Infinity War, and you got to see him bounce off the other characters a little bit, it brought something out in him and made him feel like a more natural part of the universe. And I'm like, okay, now I think Doctor Strange has found his groove. And now if they make another Doctor Strange movie, I'll be more inclined to go see it because I really liked him in the last couple of times I saw him. So I thought maybe having Captain Marvel in Endgame will bring something out in her that will make her work and make her more acceptable as a character, and they can fix all the problems in the next Captain Marvel movie that they do. I think it got worse. Because when I saw Endgame, I was like, oh my god, she is a charisma vacuum standing next to Rocket Raccoon and Tony and Thor and Black Widow and everybody else. It's like, you don't belong here. It's crazy. And again, she's so superpowered because some people criticize, like, oh, she's barely in the movie. I'm like, yeah, because if she was in the movie would be over. She's too powerful. In fact, a lot of the complaints that people have against Superman being too powerful, I could easily levy those same criticisms against Captain Marvel. And for whatever reason, it's okay when she does it. I don't know. But as far as like female superheroes goes, I'd much rather have Wonder Woman. Scarlet Witch, who is barely in Endgame, left way more of a positive impression on me than Captain Marvel did. Black Widow, I'm hearing that they're filming her movie right now. I'm like, all right, I'd like a Black Widow movie. As long as it's not an origin story, because I like the mystery with a lot of the S.H.I.E.L.D. characters, like her and Nick Fury. It's like, don't explain anything about their backstories, or at least not all of it. I don't need an origin story, but like a solo mission with her off doing something, which is going to have to be a prequel, I guess, but that would be neat. I'd be in favor of that. Maybe do something about something she did while the snap was in effect. That would be cool. But again, we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, Captain Marvel just didn't do it for me. Sorry. I think. Oh, one other thing I did like, Stan Lee's cameo was kind of neat. I like the Mallrats reference. So other than that, yeah, I didn't care for this. Didn't care for Captain Marvel. Sorry. But next, one movie that I did enjoy was what I guess you would call another Captain Marvel, Shazam. I thought Shazam was delightful. I was pleasantly surprised. Shazam is a character in a comic book property that I'm not overly familiar with. I know of Shazam, but I was never a huge fan of that character or too much about it. I was always familiar with it, but I was never that big of a fan. And then I went into this movie. It's like, all right, the trailers kind of look promising. It looks like big as a superhero movie. That's kind of neat. And I saw it, and I was like, that was a perfectly enjoyable film. I really, really liked it. And it was DC trying to be a Marvel movie, but actually succeeding at it and making it like a fun, whimsical, lighthearted film. But also having a few darker elements to kind of balance it out. Like the boardroom scene in particular, I've heard was nightmare fuel for a bunch of kids, which I kind of like. I like giving kids nightmare fuel. But because, when I was a kid, I grew up in the 80s. We had nightmare fuel in every other movie we watched. It was great. It was awesome. Toughened us up. It was great. But a lot of the things they did with Shazam and this kid becoming the superhero and learning how to become a superhero and interacting with the other foster kids that he interacts with. And that's another thing I liked about this film, where it was nice to see a foster family presented as presented in a positive light, because most of the foster parents I know are really good people that want to help kids, but too often in movies they get portrayed as kind of like dickheads and jerks, like in Terminator 2, which, I love Terminator 2, but that seems to be the prevailing way that foster families are presented in movies. So it was refreshing to see like a positive representation of a foster family. And this kid Billy, I can't talk. This kid Billy, like, not only learning how to use his powers, but learning to accept his foster family as his real family. There was one really heartbreaking moment in the middle of the film. This movie made me feel things that I didn't expect. I was a little surprised. And, his best friend, his best brother, the one that he hangs around with the most, who's the cripple, he had a really big emotional moment as well that kind of took me by surprise. So, and I think one of the things I admired about this movie is it wasn't just a straight-up special effects showcase for superheroes, which basically a lot of superhero films are these days. It was more of like a grounded character movie, and I kind of appreciated that, and I really enjoyed it. If I have any issues with the movie, the climax got a little silly for me, like where all the foster kids, like get the Shazam powers and they all go up against the demons. To me, it was like, yeah, they really learned how to do that quickly. It would have been like putting Brody in as War Machine at the tail end of the first Iron Man movie without like doing any build up to it. And I was like, what? He knows how to use the suit already? Even in Iron Man 2, it's like, what? He knows how to use the suit? When did that happen? But anyway, it just, that felt a little like rushed to me and a little convenient. But overall, I thought Shazam was a very entertaining film and kind of represented a best of both worlds for both, like finding kind of that like fun whimsy of the Marvel movies, but kind of like having a foot in the darkness that DC is known for, and it was, I mean, dare I say it's either this or Wonder Woman is DC's best movie with this like new series that they've been trying to do. And at this point, I think DC, Batman v Superman was a huge misstep. Suicide Squad was a misstep. Justice League was a disaster. But I gotta be honest, like when you look at Wonder Woman, you look at Shazam, and even Aquaman, which I wasn't enamored with Aquaman, but I thought it was okay. At least it wasn't painful. I will give Aquaman that. I wasn't in pain while watching the movie. I think we're finally getting to a point where DC's like turning the corner and their movies aren't guaranteed shitfests. It's like, okay, I could go into a DC movie and be probably okay. If it looks good, maybe it is good, and they prove they can make good movies. So I'm really excited to see what else they've got lined up, and maybe they can do something good. I'd love a Justice League Dark movie. Just throwing that out there. That's one on my checklist that I would really like to see, a Justice League Dark movie. If they could pull that off, I'd be fully on board with that. But keeping on with the superhero trend, we now move on to Avengers Endgame, which is probably going to wind up being the biggest movie of the year. I can't imagine anything else topping it at this point. And it's the culmination of the entire, what's now known as the Infinity Saga. I saw the Blu-ray release. That's pretty neat, by the way. 20 some odd films over the course of 11 years, and this is the grand conclusion to all of it. And not that the MCU is going to stop, because we've still got Spider-Man Far From Home, and they've announced a few other movies and various other things. But this is like the end of this era of the MCU that's started way back with the original Iron Man. And I kind of liken this movie to something like Return of the Jedi or Return of the King, where the movie has flaws. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. With Return of the Jedi, my big issue with that film is the Death Star rehash, which is really my only issue with the film. Everything else I kind of love, but the fact that they rehashed the Death Star, I'm like, that could have been better. I probably would have had the Rebels invade Coruscant as kind of the big plot rather than just doing the Death Star again. But fine, it's okay. They could have made bigger mistakes. But anyway, Return of the King, that movie of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, it has the most wrong with it, like the lambus bread scene, which even when I saw it back then, I was like, the fuck is that? But when it hits a home run, it hits it so hard that any issue I had, it's like, you know what? Take it. I'll let it slide. Because you hit it when you hit the home run when you really need to. And that's what this movie does. Avengers Endgame, I have issues with it. And I'll sit here and list them all right now. I think my biggest issue with the movie is how they handled Thanos. Thanos was so good in Infinity War. So fucking good. To the point that I put Josh Brolin in the list of guys that should have been nominated for an Oscar but didn't because he's a CGI character, and that's bullshit. It's like Andy Serkis should have been nominated for Gollum and Caesar from the Planet of the Apes films. Frank Oz should have been nominated for Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, but you can't, it's a puppet. And Josh Brolin should have been nominated for Thanos. My logic being, it's like, look, they're there on set doing this shit. It's not like they're not there. Can't we just look at the CGI or the puppet as their costume? No! I was like, alright, fine, whatever. But my point is, Thanos was great in Infinity War. And the way they handled him here, as I'm sure everybody knows, given that pretty much everybody and their mother has seen this movie by now, but they kill Thanos in the first 20 minutes of the film. Which was shocking. I was like, oh, whoa, okay. And there's some positives that come along with that, and I'm going to talk about that when I talk about the positives. But by doing that, it kind of robbed the movie of, like, a looming threat. And there's nothing nipping at the hero's heels throughout the film when they do their whole time heist thing. There's no reason for them to act urgently. Like, it's like, why do they feel the need to, like, go time traveling now? It's like, Thanos isn't around. You're fine. You can just keep doing your thing and plan this out a little bit better. Because I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's so it kind of robbed the film of a threat. And then when past Thanos comes into the present and becomes the main threat of the film, it almost feels like a different character. It doesn't feel like the same Thanos that we got in Infinity War. And actually, the Thanos we get here in the climax kind of is the Thanos that I feared we were going to get with Infinity War, where he's just a big CGI bad guy that wants to blow shit up. And it's like, the levels and the nuance that the character had in Infinity War just isn't there. So when he's defeated at the end, shocker, it's not. It doesn't quite feel as satisfying. At least not for me. I know a lot of other people just loved it, and there were things I loved about the ending, but Thanos wasn't the biggest fan of how he was handled. Professor Hulk. I didn't like that they resolved that off screen because that was one of the major things coming out of Infinity War. It's like, oh, how's Bruce going to Hulk out again? How's he going to resolve that whole thing? And the whole thing happened off screen. I'm like, okay, that's kind of disappointing. I mean, it's not as bad as Pirates of the Caribbean 3 where the Kraken was killed off screen. I'm like, what? I spent like the entire, after I saw the second movie, I was like, how are they going to kill the Kraken? And then it happened off screen. I was like, oh, that's bullshit. But it wasn't as bad as that, but it's still like, I would have liked to have seen an on-screen resolution to that. And probably the most controversial thing to come out of this film, like that has gotten people debating, is Fat Thor. Because obviously there's the 5-year time jump, and everybody's in this really dark place following the snap, and the snap can't be undone. And Thor has taken to drinking and eating a lot and getting out of shape, and he's fat. And I love the idea of Thor becoming a broken human being, and we see signs of that. Right after you find out he's fat, and you get to that point where he goes up to Bruce, and he's like, when Bruce mentions Thanos, and Thor's like, don't say that name. And that was really powerful stuff, and really made me feel something for Thor. Unfortunately, instead of leading into the tragedy side of things, they lean more into the jokey side of things. And I don't want to get into body positivity and all that shit because I don't care. But it's more like they took something I felt should have been treated like a tragedy and they treated it like a joke. And I don't know. I think Thor kind of deserved better than... Again, I'm not opposed to Fat Thor. I just wish they'd lean more into the tragedy side of things. And I wish that instead of him just having a pep talk with Mom and grabbing the hammer, it's like, I'm still worthy. I would have liked for him to do something to prove that he's still worthy. So it's like, I wish that had been handled a little differently. And the time travel aspect, which they explained in this film, and I fully understand that no time travel movie is perfect. Back to the Future, which is my favorite time travel film of all time, not perfect. My big one for Back to the Future, it's like, wait a minute, so if you take Marty and his girlfriend 30 years into the future, aren't you removing them from the timeline? So when they go 30 years into the future to help their kids won't exist because you just remove them from the timeline. But anyway, whatever. In this movie, they explain that going back in time to change the past does not alter the future. Which opens the door for like multiverses and a Loki TV show, which is like, gee, I wonder what they were setting up there. My issue with it is that by explaining that, it's like, okay. They also explain that they need the Pym particles to go back in time because Ant-Man plays a big role in this and helps them figure out how to pull this off. And I'm like, okay, if you're limited on Pym particles, why don't you just go back in time like 2 minutes and grab the ones you already have, and then just give yourself an infinite amount of Pym particles? It's like, dude, it's like the ultimate cheat code. Come on, this is easy. Problem solved. And they don't do that. Again, that also ties in the whole problem of not having Thanos there because they killed him. If Thanos was like nipping at their heels, or if there was like a looming threat of Thanos like figuring out what they're doing, I can understand them kind of rushing this. But as is, it's like, dude, I think you need a little bit more time to plan this and get more Pym particles. Wait for Captain Marvel to show up, because it really, even though I just spent the last few minutes railing on Captain Marvel, It actually makes the movie make less sense that they don't wait for her to go back in time with them, because she could have easily gotten 4 of the 6 stones by herself. She's that powerful. The only ones that would have tripped her up, I think, are the Time Stone, because getting past the Ancient One would have been tough, and the Soul Stone, because it's like somebody's got to die to get the Soul Stone. So, but she could have gotten the other 4 without even trying, I think, but would have been easy. Super easy. What's the Screen Rant pitch meeting? Super easy, barely an inconvenience. So like that would have been, but again, I said she's so powerful. If she was there the whole time, the movie would have been over. So, but in any case, so the time traveling had some issues, but I kind of let that slide with time travel films because there's always issue with time travel films. It's just inherent to the. It's like Austin Powers. It's like just don't worry about it and have fun, and that goes for you too. So those are my issues with the movie, and they might sound pretty big, but believe me when I say, when this movie hits a home run, it really, really hits a home run. I think where this movie succeeds the most is its treatment of Tony, Iron Man, and Captain America, who are probably my two favorites of the Avengers. Cap is my number one favorite. I love Cap. And this movie is their big send-off. So for them to get the emotional satisfaction to their stories that they got, and Cap getting the big moments, because I gotta tell you, my big mark-out moment in the whole movie was when he picked up Mjolnir and started using it. I'm like, yeah, because if anybody else is worthy of holding that goddamn hammer, it's goddamn Captain America. Cap's my boy. Cap is my boy. I love him. And so all of that was great. I loved even seeing Tony with his family and the little girl, who was so cute. That little girl was so cute. She was in Godzilla, too. She had a very small role in Godzilla as the young version of Millie Bobby Brown's character. But, I mean, I love you 3000 line, I mean, that's like a classic movie quote now. It's so, it was just so adorable. And I thought, I'll make this point, I did not cry when Iron Man died because I was ready to say goodbye to him, and I kind of prepared myself for it. I was prepared for both Tony and Cap to die. Cap didn't die, but he got an ending, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I really, I was really prepared for Tony to die, so when he did, I was able to keep myself in check emotionally, but it was a very, very emotionally satisfying conclusion to his story in the way he sacrificed himself using the Infinity Stones in a great moment where he took the Infinity Stones from Thanos and managed to undo the snap. Well, the snap was already undone by Hulk, but he snapped again and basically killed Thanos' entire army with the "I am Iron Man" line. It's like, oh, the line that started the universe is the line that ends the saga. I'm like, that is on point. And really, other things I liked, well, going back to Cap, like I said, he had a lot of really cool, badass moments. He got to fight himself when they time traveled, which was great. Had some of the funnier lines, and got his dance with Peggy, finally, is the closing scene of the movie, where there were some confusing things, again, with the time traveling. It's like, wait, how does that work? If you can't affect the past when you go... If you can't affect the future when you change the past, then how is Old Man Cap there? Shouldn't he have appeared in the time machine? Whatever. I'll let it slide. But him getting his dance with Peggy, I was kind of mixed on. And I love Peggy Carter. She's probably my favorite female character in the MCU. But I was kind of like, it's kind of like Batman going back in time to save his parents or Superman going back in time to save Krypton. It's like, do you want to undo the tragedy that makes the hero what the hero is? And it's like, but you know what? The Marvel movies, they earned that dance. They really did. They put so much work into Cap and his whole story. It's like, you know what? I'll let it slide. And I do love Cap and I do love Peggy. So it's like, all right, it's fine. And yeah, those are some of the things I liked. I also really liked the whole time heist section. I loved Ant-Man in this movie. This is the most I've liked Ant-Man. I thought the way he was introduced into the story and how he found out about what was going on and all of that, and how he gives them the key to ultimately undo the snap. I thought all of that was great. I also like that it wasn't an entirely clean, let's just undo the snap. I love that they did a 5-year time jump. And I think there's a wealth of material to work with there where it's like, wait a minute, so what about the people who lost their spouse in the snap and then remarried? Like, what's going to happen now that the snap's been undone? And what about all the people? Does everybody, appear exactly where they were when the snap happened? Because what about, the airplane pilot that disappears? And he just appears in midair and just falls to his death. It's like this... I feel like you could do an entire movie of just the ramifications of undoing the snap, and I think it would actually be great. I think it'd be, but this movie's all about giving a conclusion, so they didn't really need to explore that too much. But I did enjoy a lot of the time heist stuff and revisiting the old movies, and just kind of being a clip show without being a clip show was kind of fun. It kind of, a lot of people compared it to Back to the Future too, and there is that element there for sure. And, I loved a lot of the character interactions. Rocket was great in this. It was cool to see Rocket get to, interact with the Avengers. Because Rocket's my favorite Guardian, so that was kind of cool to see. And Nebula got a lot to do, which kind of surprised me. She was kind of really one of the major characters in the film. And yeah, just a thoroughly fun ride. You got, and some people pointed this out, and they're right. The first act is like a funeral because it's just about dealing with the snap, and I love all that stuff because it's dour and depressing and totally fits the mood. The second part is that middle part, which is like the time heist section, and then you get the third act, which is this big explosive climax, which was great and mostly great, and was really well done. Thanos wasn't entirely happy with how he was handled, but it didn't matter. You got to see all the heroes doing all these really cool things, and so it was a very exciting ending to 11 years worth of making movies. So the MCU really stuck the landing there. Again, faults aside, and even another fault, I wasn't the biggest fan of Black Widow's death. I felt like that could have been done better. I didn't mind that they did it and that she sacrificed herself to get the Soul Stone, but there was part of me that was like, I don't know, something just feels off about that. I don't know what it is, but something was just off. But, all those issues aside, I think when this movie sticks the landing, it really, really sticks the landing. And I have to say, probably the most fun I've had in a theater all year, because I was sharing the theater with a bunch of Marvel fans who were just losing their goddamn minds the entire time. My sister saw it opening night, and she called me up crying, and she was like, "It's so good, you're going to love this movie so much. Cap's your favorite. I know you're going to love the stuff with Cap." And I thought Endgame was a more than satisfying conclusion to everything that Marvel had built up to this point. I thought they did an excellent job. Now, are they going to be able... What are they going to do next? Because it's like they've got to go back to basics. And doing that, I don't know, people going to accept them going back to basics so soon? I don't know. We'll find out. But it's going to be exciting. With the Fox purchase and Disney now having the rights to the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, it does open a lot of doors for things they can do. So that's kind of cool. So we'll see what happens there. But Endgame I thought was very entertaining and deserved just about all the praise that it got. Now, something that does not deserve any praise at all and really fell off a cliff to a point that shocks me. Game of Thrones Season 8, the final season. What the fuck happened here? Seriously, what happened to this show? I'm at a loss for words about this show was poised to become one of the greatest shows of all time. And all they had to do was stick the landing. And yeah, there had been a decline in quality in some of the later seasons. Season 7 wasn't as good, but it was still good enough. And it's look, as long as you don't fuck up, I think you'll be okay. Boy, did they fuck up. And is there anything I can say that hasn't already been said? It's kind of... this was a disappointment on a massive level, and I don't even know what to say. I've never read the books, and I'm going to disappoint you book readers very quickly. You're not getting an ending to those books. I'm just telling you that right now, so it's best that you just accept that right now, because there's no way that George R.R. Martin is going to finish those books in his lifetime. It's going to have to be finished by somebody else, if you get it at all. But the TV show, and really what it comes down to, is that everything they did was so rushed that nothing felt earned, especially when you get to the finale, and it just was a wildly unsatisfying experience. Okay, just some examples of where they ended up. I actually like the idea of Sansa becoming the Queen of the North. Unfortunately, they didn't have her do anything to earn that position. What the fuck did Sansa do? She's the last Stark left that can hold any kind of power in Winterfell. Okay, but it felt all right, she's the Queen of the North. I'm yeah, and she did almost nothing to earn it. She was just starting to, understand the game and how to, manipulate things to go her way and everything else. But she never really had, those really powerful moments to really warrant her ascending to the throne. It felt like she was there when Ramsay died, and then that was it. That was, the last cool thing she did. And then everything else was just her, kind of complaining, and that's it. But again, it was just rushed. Bran becoming the king of everything, Bran the Broken. No one's got a better story than Bran. I'm I beg to differ. I can think of quite a few characters that have a better story than Bran. He was left out of season 5, for God's sake, and his whole plotline, even when the show was at its best, I never was that attached to, because it's okay, what is this three-eyed raven thing, and where is they going with this, and how's it going to tie into everything? And the only thing I liked about that whole subplot was Hodor. and who got a really awesome moment. You know, and it was that was really powerful, but everything else surrounding Bran was just so boring. And if you had told me from the beginning that he was going to be the king of Westeros, I would have been like, what? How? Why? No! But maybe it could have worked if they had built up to it, but Bran did nothing. I still don't know, like, what the point of the three-eyed raven powers are. I don't know why the Night King wanted him dead. I don't know why... I don't even know what the Night King was, because that was when the show lost me, when they killed the Night King. I was like, wait, so the White Walkers don't even make it to King's Landing? I feel like that's what the show has been building to, and it's like, nope, not getting that. Not getting that at all. Alright. Fine. And then Arya, she's going west of Westeros. Westeros. Why, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why she forgot that she can be a faceless assassin, because that didn't play into anything at all. Tyrion became an idiot. Went from being the most clever character on the show to being a blithering moron. Cersei and Jaime, they didn't get a satisfying ending at all. They basically did away with Jaime's, like, entire, like, redemption, thing that they've been building up. It was just a mess. The whole season was just a mess, and I was just blown away that they fucked it up this much. I was shocked. I was like, I cannot believe they fucked it up this bad. And by the time they get to the Daenerys heel turn, which, again, I actually like the idea of a Daenerys Targaryen heel turn. Because with that character, it's like, alright, there's only two ways this can go. She's either Jesus or Mad Queen. Those are the only ways they can go with this character. So it's like, alright, you want to go Mad Queen, that's fine. They did not build up to that at all whatsoever. And they're like, oh, but we referenced it in, we've foreshadowed it in earlier seasons. I'm like, okay, no, you don't give me a peach pit and tell me it's a peach tree. No. You gotta work at it. You gotta build up to it. You can't just, like, say, oh, but we referenced it, we foreshadowed it earlier in the earlier seasons. I'm like, did you? And if you did, like, don't you... Okay, if you had it in mind that early that she was going to have a heel turn, I feel like you should have done a much better job of building up to that point. Because as is, it's like, alright, so Captain Friendzone died. Missandre died. She lost two of her dragons, which the death of the second dragon, that was stupid. By the way, the pitch, I already referenced the Screen Rant pitch meetings. The pitch meeting on Game of Thrones Season 8 is amazing. You should go watch it. But, like, alright, all of that, and then her nephew doesn't want to fuck her. And that's her whole motivation for wanting to burn everybody to death and rule the world. It's like, okay, this isn't satisfying at all. Not one bit. And, again, I mean, this is one of the most amazing fuck-ups I've ever seen in the history of television. It's one of the reasons I get a little, trepidatious about getting into a TV show. It's like, I want to make sure that it has a really good ending first. I mean, Breaking Bad, perfect from start to finish, just about. Bates Motel, which I think is underrated, starts off poorly, and then slowly improves itself through seasons 3, 4, and 5 to the point where the ending is amazing. And now Bates Motel is like one of my favorite shows in the last decade. By the way, that show's underrated. You should totally watch it. But again, the first two seasons are a little rough, but once you get past that, it's all peaches and cream. But then you have shows like Lost, which totally fucked up its ending. Shows like Dexter, which fucked up its ending. And unlike comedy, like, I'll use The Simpsons as an example. You can, with The Simpsons, you can pretty much stop at season 9 and you're fine. You're not really missing the end of a major story if you stop watching. Archer's another great example, where I think the earlier seasons of Archer are absolutely incredible. The stuff that they've been doing lately with, you know, Dreamland and Danger Island, and this new one, which I haven't seen, the sci-fi adventure in 1999, which, again, I love that they call it 1999. I think that's funny. But it's just so far off the mark from what the show used to be. It's like, you know, you can pretty much stop watching at season 7 and you're fine. And comedy has that, and sitcoms in particular have that kind of leverage where you know there's a stopping point and you can just stop watching. It doesn't ruin the earlier seasons. But when you're doing a story arc from start to finish and your ending sucks, it ruins everything that came before it, and it makes me sad that Game of Thrones is counted among that. It's like, what the fuck happened? What? I mean, people far smarter and much better than me have been talking about it ever since it happened. It is one of the most universally panned things I've seen in a while, and rightfully so. They missed the mark on so many things. And it's sad, because it's not, it's not the special effects. It's not the actors. The actors did the absolute best they could with this mess. Maybe it's a little bit on the production side of things with the Starbucks cup that made it into a shot. I'm like, that's embarrassing, but... it looks great for the most, except for the long night. That was, I joked, it's like, did you see Game of Thrones last night? I think I did. I couldn't tell. The screen was dark. The music is absolutely amazing, and has been throughout the entire duration of the show. And then the story just doesn't work, and it's a shame. It really is a shame. This was a pop culture phenomenon, and it deserved a fantastic ending, and you didn't get it. Really, really sad. And by the way, that government that they established at the end of the show is totally going to fall apart. It's like, who the fuck decided to make the mercenary the master of coin? You deserve whatever horrible thing happens for making that decision. But anyway. So there's that. One series finale that I thought turned out rather well, much to my surprise, was The Big Bang Theory. Now, The Big Bang Theory was a show that I watched in the earlier seasons, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was cute. I thought it was a nice, like, traditional sitcom, and was had some energy to it and some creative characters. I thought Sheldon was really funny because he reminded me of people that I've known in my life. Not to get too personal, but I thought it was a really funny show in the early seasons. But much like The Simpsons, much like Archer, and a few other shows I've mentioned, it overstayed its welcome. 12 seasons is probably way more of a shelf life that show ever should have had. But when I heard it was ending, I was like, all right, at the very least, I haven't watched it in years, but at the very least, I was like, all right, I'll check out the finale, just see how it ends. I thought the finale was very good. I thought it was a nice, emotional closure to the show. They didn't overdo it. They didn't have like any kind of paradigm shifting things or say massive goodbyes where everybody moves away or anything like that. They just did a really nice thing where Sheldon wins a Nobel Prize, and he finally puts his friends and his extended family over himself in a really nice moment. And I gotta be honest, when Sheldon was giving a speech where he was asking all of them to stand up one by one, I started to get a little misty-eyed. I was like, that is really sweet. So I live in a world where The Big Bang Theory has a way more satisfying finale than Game of Thrones. What the fuck happened? And I know a lot of people hate The Big Bang Theory, and if I hear the term blackface for nerds ever again, I'm gonna lose my mind, because all I'll say about that is I've been to cons. I see how some of y'all act. The show was too nice to you. That's number one. Number two, and I'm saying this fully admitting that I'm a dork too. And number two, the criticism that all they do is make nerd references to try and like steal nerd cred or buy goodwill with nerds by just referencing a bunch of shit. I'm like, I think that was true in later seasons because, like I said, it overstayed its welcome and it got really, really lazy with the writing in later seasons. But in those earlier seasons, I thought there was a lot of heart to the show. I really did. And I thought it was good. So, a show that overstayed its welcome, but at least finished strong. So I'll give them that. They at least finished strong. And which can't say the same thing about Game of Thrones. Wow, what happened there? So, getting back to movies, let's get into one that I actually really liked. Sorry, I'm just messing around with my notes here, my list. Okay. Detective Pikachu. Now, this is an interesting one. Detective Pikachu is the first major Pokemon live-action film, and I'm sure Pokemon fans sucked this thing up like it was crack, because it was just, it was a movie made for them. If nobody else, it was definitely made for Pokemon fans. And unfortunately, I am not a Pokemon fan at all. I hated the show when I was a kid. I never got into the games. I understood the appeal in the games. I just never got sucked into it myself. And but I hated the TV show. I hated it. I thought it was so annoying, and it really ticked me off that what Pokemon did kind of became the new trend, and that's when you started seeing things like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Digimon and all these other things, and all of a sudden, all these shows that I adored got canceled. It was the end of Batman, the animated series. It was the end of the Superman show. It was the end of Pinky and the Brain. Well, Pinky and the Brain, they ruined it, and then they canceled it. It was the end of Animaniacs. Freakazoid didn't get the run that it should have. Even Godzilla, the series based off the TriStar film, which I actually liked, that got canceled in favor of like the Digimons of the world. And I blamed Pokemon for basically destroying all of my shows. And whether fairly or unfairly, that was just how I saw it back then. Since then, I've kind of mellowed out. My hate for Pokemon isn't as strong as it used to be. But I still never got sucked into it. I didn't even get sucked into the Pokemon Go craze because I could just see myself. It's like I could see myself wandering into traffic, not paying attention because I'm an idiot like that. So best not get me addicted to that. But really, my knowledge of Pokemon doesn't go any farther than I know who Pikachu is because he's a pop culture icon. And I know of some of the Pokemon stuff that's referenced in Super Smash Bros. Because I love the Super Smash Bros. Games, and there's a lot of Pokemon stuff in there. And actually, Pikachu's one of my go-to fighters in that game. So, but other than that, my experiences with Pokemon are very minimal. I think of the movies, the animated movies that they did, the only thing I've ever seen of those, I saw about 2 minutes of the first movie. I think it was the first movie. Where there's like clones of Pokemon fighting each other, and there's a scene where Pikachu is bitch slapping his clone, and his clone is bitch slapping him back. And I thought that was really funny to the point that I laughed so hard I didn't even like pay attention to whatever the hell else was going on, and I missed the rest of the movie because I was like, oh my god, I think I called somebody. I was like, I just saw the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. But I didn't actually watch the movie. I just saw that one clip. Basically, it was on one of the movie channels or something, and it made me laugh. But basically, my experience with Pokemon is extremely minimal, and I'm not a fan. But I started seeing trailers for Detective Pikachu, and I'm like, that looks kind of neat. I kind of like what I'm seeing here. And the Pokemon look great. They look like they left right off the cards or right out of the game, and they inhabit, like, the CGI renderings of them look like they inhabit this world perfectly, and I was like... And it had kind of a noirish twinge to it, and I love noir shit, so I was kind of like, I think I want to see this. And, of course, Ryan Reynolds, who, Mr. Deadpool himself, anything with him in it at this point, after doing Deadpool, it's like, you know what, I'm going to give this guy a chance. And I'm glad I did, because I actually enjoyed this movie way more than I thought I would. That if you had told me 10 years ago that I was going to enjoy a Pokemon movie, a Pokemon live-action movie, I would have called you a liar. And especially, video game movies themselves are so terrible for the most part. Castlevania on Netflix, that animated show, I think is the best video game adaptation I've ever seen. Other than that, I think I said during my Kaiju Corner reviews, when I reviewed Rampage, I said Rampage is the best video game movie I've ever seen. And I gave it a D. That tells you the level of quality that we typically get out of video game movies. But I think we have a new winner. Detective Pikachu is my pick for best video game movie ever made. Now, where the movie falters, I think the story is a little weak. The mystery, because again, this is a noir and a detective story, that's a little weak too. And the mystery's not as strong as I was hoping it would be. So it does have those obvious flaws. And maybe some of the human characters don't really do it for me, except for the lead, Justin Smith. I think his interactions with Pikachu are really good. And it also helps that Ryan Reynolds is just a delight to watch, which I'll elaborate on that in a bit. But, so there's some obvious flaws with this movie, but again, I kind of let it slide because I really like the world. I think the world that this movie creates is awesome. And there's a lot of movies that I like just for the world. I think Blade Runner is a great example of that, where I don't like Blade Runner as much as a lot of other people do, but the world is amazing. And I do love Rutger Hauer in that film. He's awesome. But a lot of the characters in that film don't really do it for me, but the world is so fucking cool. Dick Tracy, the original one, story very basic, but the world is amazing. Dark Crystal, the world is basic, or no, the story is basic, but the world is incredible. So there's a bunch of movies that get by on just how cool the world is, and I think Detective Pikachu is one of those movies where I wasn't necessarily in love with the movie, but I thought I would definitely like to see a sequel of this film, because I think there's more gold to be mined here. It's like they can definitely make a better movie in this world. I definitely, for sure. And again, the Pokemon look amazing. They look very cute. They look like they leapt right off the cards, or out of the video game or whatever. They look exactly how they're supposed to look. And the interactions with them, and Pikachu's interactions with them, and Justice Smith's interactions with them, I think are all great. As Mr. Mime has one of the standout scenes in the movie. Psyduck, who is actually my sister's favorite Pokemon, he's like number 2 in the movie behind Pikachu, and he's great. I love Psyduck in this. And Pikachu with Ryan Reynolds' voice is awesome. I love that little guy. Just the seeing Detective Pikachu with a little Sherlock Holmes hat and drinking coffee. He's like a caffeine addict. And talking with Ryan Reynolds' voice the entire film, I was like, I love this little guy. He is fantastic. And I enjoyed the movie enough, and I liked the character of Detective Pikachu enough to where I was like, I kind of want to play the Detective Pikachu game now. It kind of makes me want to play that game, because I never played it. But, so Detective Pikachu, I was pleasantly surprised by it. And granted, I'm not going to say it's one of the best movies of the year, and I didn't love it necessarily, but the stuff I liked about it, I really liked about it, which is the world and the character of Pikachu. Now, again, I feel like... another Pokemon who really stood out was Ditto. I thought what they did with Ditto was really good as well. But I think they can definitely tell a better story in this world, and I'd love to see them try. I would love to see another attempt at a Pokemon movie set in this setting, and just achieving the special effects the exact same way, and maybe have other actors voice other Pokemon and see if they can do something with that. But yeah, I love the foundation that this movie set up, even if I didn't really like the story. The story itself is kind of not too great, and the payoff to the mystery, not too great. But the world is amazing, and I think if you're a Pokemon fan, because again, I got something out of this movie, and I'm not a Pokemon fan. If you're a Pokemon fan, I think this movie's absolutely for you, and you will eat this up like a cat eats catnip. Like, this is just... this is absolutely a film that you would enjoy, and from the sound of it, like, a lot of Pokemon fans really enjoyed this movie, which is like, yeah, this is for you. This is absolutely for you. And so Detective Pikachu gave me something I never expected, my younger self especially, never expected he would ever get, a Pokemon film that he would actually enjoy. So kudos to everybody that made this movie. You made me be nice to a Pokemon movie. That takes talent. I think that takes some real talent. But a movie that I enjoyed even more was one that I've been waiting for ever since the second one, and that's John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. There were 3 movies that I was dying to see this year. Avengers Endgame, which I was a little nervous about Endgame, to be honest, but I still wanted to see the conclusion. John Wick Part 3, because I loved how the second one ended. I was like, I've got to see the third one. It was like, oh my god. And obviously Godzilla. And so right now it's like, all right, Avengers delivered. And I can honestly say that John Wick 3 delivered. And the thing about these movies is that they give you a very basic story. Starting with the first one, you get a man whose dog is killed by an asshole. And it turns out that man is a former assassin that didn't want to get back into the game, but just takes one bad day to push him over the edge and go for revenge. And it's a basic revenge story, but what makes John Wick and all 3 films really stand out, don't have the most in-depth plots, don't have the most in-depth character development or anything like that. It's very basic, easily understood motivations and driving forces for the characters, but what sets it apart from the rest are these amazing action set pieces with the gunfighting and the knife fighting and all these other things that they do. And it feels like a musical or a dance recital, except with guns and knives. And whatever, as it turns out in this movie, even a book can be a deadly weapon. But it these movies never cease to amaze me, and what Keanu Reeves has done with this character and the preparation that he's done to get ready for these movies are just unbelievable. And he's really rejuvenated his career with these movies. And the first one is great, and then I saw the second one, and that one blew my mind and looked real pretty with all the neon and everything they did. And I'm like, oh my god, I don't know what they're going to do with the third movie. But when they set it up the way they did, where basically every assassin in the world is going to be coming after John now, I was like, I mean, I've got to see the third movie, but holy shit, like, how are they going to top the second one? And then you watch the third one, the first 30 minutes are just this adrenaline rush that's amazing. Again, the knife fight scene is incredible. And then the first 30 minutes are so good, I'm like, well, fuck, what are they going to do for the rest of the movie? I feel like they peaked too early. And then you get into the scene where Halle Berry comes in, and she's got her trained dogs, and they're jumping all over the place and killing people, and Halle Berry, this is probably the most I've ever liked her in a movie. She was great in this, and super, super fucking cool. And the movie just doesn't stop being awesome. It's just incredible. And again, it's like, look, I don't need the most in-depth story. I've got enough to where I can follow it, enough where I can get emotionally invested, and they give me these amazing action sequences. And it's nice and refreshing to see an action franchise that's bringing something new to the table, gives us a new action hero icon for the genre, and it's just so awesome and badass. And that's what these movies are, man. They're just awesome and badass. And I was wondering if this movie was going to be the end, and they set up for a fourth one, and now I'm just like, oh my god, what are they going to do now? It's like, but I want to see it. I just want to see more. And again, it's like a ballet almost, the way that these action set pieces are done. It's really amazing what they've done with these films, and they're so creative and so energetic and so amazing that I just adore these movies. I think the John Wick films are some of my favorite action movies that have come out in modern times. They are just absolutely incredible, and I love them so much. And I was so happy to see the third one deliver as well as it did. I was just thumbs up, man. It was so good. So good. And I cannot wait for the fourth one now. It's like, now we wait for John Wick Part 4. But I think if you're a fan of John Wick 1 and 2, this movie's got you covered. And here's the thing. This one might be the weakest of the three. And it's awesome. I mean, if your only sin is you're awesome, but you're not as awesome as what came before you, it's like, I can live with that. That's awesome. And there's plenty of room. Let me put it this way: there's a bad guy in this film, the Adjudicator, who does all this horrible stuff to some of the side characters, and is just a bitch all around. And she does not get her comeuppance in this film. And it's like, oh, because I saw the film with my dad, and that was his first comment. It's like, oh, they didn't kill the Adjudicator? I thought she was gonna get it. I'm like, you gotta wait for the fourth one. And it's like, oh my god, like, because when she finally gets it, it's gonna be fucking sweet. Oh god, they give us something to wait for. It's great. But yeah, I think the John Wick franchise, I cannot praise it enough. From the cinematography to the way the fast pace, the exciting action sequences, the way it looks, the way it sounds, it is an amazing thrill ride, every single one of these movies, and I cannot wait for the fourth one. It is going to be killer. So from there, we go into a movie that I kind of had high expectations for. It didn't quite live up to it. Brightburn. Now, one thing that has really made me happy with movies in the last few years is that the horror genre has really made a comeback. It feels like we finally moved past the found footage crap, and now we're back to having these great original concepts in horror movies again. A Quiet Place is a great example. Get Out is a great example. Lights Out and Don't Breathe, which, that movie took a dark turn, didn't it? For a while I thought, it's like, God, if I want good horror, I've got to go into like the indie side of things. Like, I loved The Babadook and I loved Oculus, but those were like straight to video, straight to streaming, indie level stuff. We're now getting like big, theater released horror movies, and they're great. And, for the most part, they're really good. And we're getting all these original concepts, and even the remakes are looking kind of decent, because, it was pretty good, and I want to see the second one. So it makes me so happy that horror has made a comeback in major, like, mainstream cinema. And when I saw the trailer for Brightburn, I was like, oh, I'm on board with this. Like, okay, a superhero horror movie, I am totally down for this. Where they basically take the Superman mythology and twist it to where, what if instead of becoming a good old boy, Superman becomes a psychopath that murders people? So when I started seeing the trailers for Brightburn, I was like really impressed with the concept. I just love the idea of what's basically a Superman Elseworld story, but they can't call it Superman. They can't call him Clark Kent, obviously, but it's basically Superman, where this kid who was found in a spaceship by two Kansas parents, and they raise him as their own son, and then it turns out he figures out he has all these powers and abilities, and instead of doing good with them, he becomes a fucking murderer and starts killing people left and right. And I love that idea, and I was like, oh man, that's a great way to kind of like bring the superhero stuff into the world of horror. I was like, oh, this could be really, really good. And I think my biggest issue with this film is that it doesn't take full advantage of the premise. Mainly, my big issue is that we don't really see the kid develop into the psychopath. He wakes up one day, he's going through puberty, and he just starts like acting like a weirdo and murdering people. And I would have liked to have seen maybe he started off as a good kid and then struggled with the powers that he was discovering. Like, kind of like in Man of Steel, that movie that everybody hates. Probably my favorite thing in Man of Steel is showing Clark struggling with his powers. Like, I think my favorite scene in that movie is the scene where he freaks out at school because he can't, like, he's hearing everything and he can't focus and he's just freaking out and his mom is, like, calling to him, like, just focus on my voice, sweetie. And like, that scene I thought was very good, and I would have liked to have seen some of that in this movie to kind of help show him struggling with his powers, and then some things and events take place that force him into the wrong direction on how to use his powers. And because as is, it kind of feels like he learns how to do all this stuff really quickly, where Superman and Clark, like, in some incarnations, he kind of has to get used to it rather than just naturally knowing how to do everything. So I think that lack of development kind of robs the movie of a lot of its potential. All that said, it's well acted. Elizabeth Banks is in it, and she's pretty good as the mom. Most of the acting's pretty good for the most part. And it's a pretty solid, like, perfectly enjoyable horror movie with plenty of gore and scares and everything like that. And when he does start, like, flying around killing people and melting them with his heat vision and everything, it is kind of neat to see, and a very different take on, like, some of those iconic images that you associate with Superman and other superheroes. It's still kind of neat to see that kind of thing in a horror movie. I just wish they had plenty of room to really expand on stuff. Even with the mom, like, because the mom is very protective of him throughout the film, and like, no, he wouldn't do anything. He's my sweet little boy. And I wondered how far they were going to go with that, if she was actually going to protect him to the point where she would actually hide the fact that he's a murderer. From everybody, very much like how Ma Kent hides the fact that her son is Superman, and kind of do like a twisted version of that. But yeah, unfortunately, the movie just doesn't quite live up to its potential. But it's a solid watch regardless. So I think if you're looking for just a horror movie to pass the time, I think it's a decent one. Just not as good as it probably could or should have been. So there's that. Next up is a remake, another one in the long line of Disney remakes, Aladdin. And Disney is in the habit of remaking fucking everything that everybody remembers at this point. They've done Mary Poppins. They're doing The Lion King. They're doing Little Mermaid. They've done Beauty and the Beast. They've done Pete's Dragon. They've done The Jungle Book. And they're just dead set on just remaking all their animated shit into live action films. They better stay away from The Great Mouse Detective. That is my personal favorite one. Don't you dare ruin that movie. Leave that one alone. But anyway, if you can't tell, I'm not the biggest fan of Disney doing these live action remakes, mainly because for me, it's like, if you're going to do a remake, you should either improve it, which I feel like they did with Pete's Dragon, to be perfectly fair. I felt like that was an improvement over the original. The original, loved it as a kid, kind of hokey as an adult, so I think what they did with the remake, I thought was actually a better movie. So if you're going to remake something, either make it better or make it different, or both. And that's not really what Disney's doing with these. They're just kind of like doing like a lesser version of a movie I've already seen, and the stuff they do change adds nothing, and or very little in most respects, and it's just not something that interests me. I would just rather watch the original film. That's just my take. Why do I need to see Will Smith sing Prince Ali when I can just watch Robin Williams do it in the animated version, where it's much better and the animation complements the song, as opposed to this film where it's just like it's trying to be this big lavish musical number and it just kind of looks ho hum. So it doesn't even look that great and it doesn't sound as good, which are some big problems. And yeah, this movie is just another one in a long line of remakes that just didn't need to exist, but Disney's going to keep making them because they make money. So, I mean, as long as people are going to go see them, they're going to keep making these things. And, everything in this movie, just about everything in this movie feels like a downgrade compared to the earlier film. Aladdin in this film, they cast this guy as Aladdin because he looks like Aladdin, like to a degree that's scary. But as we saw with Dolph Lundgren in the Masters of the Universe movie, looking the part doesn't always mean you're right for the part. Doesn't mean you're going to get the best performance, and we do not get that good of a performance. I thought Aladdin was kind of okay. In the earlier half of the film, he's kind of a smiling idiot. And then in the latter half of the film, he's like an asshole. Like the scene where he tells Genie he can't set him free, which was kind of heartbreaking in the original version, and it feels very believable. It's like, Aladdin's making the wrong choice, but he feels conflicted, and he's like, look, I'm really sorry, but I can't keep this up without you. And they get into a really heated argument. It's a really heated scene and very good, one of the better scenes in the movie. In this movie, Aladdin's kind of a dick about it, and I was like, why are you being an asshole, man? And it just didn't work. And the relationship between Genie and Aladdin does not work as well in this movie, because I thought that was the heart of the original film. Jasmine, Aladdin, romance bullshit, whatever, don't care, but the friendship between Aladdin and Genie I thought was the heart of the original film. And here it's like a lesser version of the movie Hitch with Will Smith in it. And Will Smith even says at one point, it's like, well, I don't have friends. I'm a genie. I don't really have friends. And Aladdin's kind of a dick, so it's just not there to the degree that it was in the original film. Jafar is about as menacing as a disgruntled coworker, as opposed to the original film where he's like, has a great voice, totally menacing. This guy feels like a disgruntled coworker, and I don't take him seriously at all as a villain. They give him, they try to make him interesting by doing this thing where he was a thief too on the streets like Aladdin, and he ascended to the role of Grand Vizier, and now he wants it all. So it's kind of like a vision of what Aladdin could be if he's left unchecked or if he doesn't have a conscience. But they don't really explore that any further than one or two scenes, so it doesn't really feel like that big. Again, it's a change that probably could have worked, but doesn't do anything. And Iago, they got Alan Tudyk to do the voice of Iago, and I thought, maybe that'll work, because I liked him a lot in Rogue One. And he just sounds like a normal parrot. And I'm like, why'd you bother getting him? I mean, you could probably have gotten any halfway decent voice actor to just sound like a parrot. I don't know, that just seems like... And a far cry from Gilbert Gottfried, who's like a force of nature in Aladdin. He was actually, when I was a kid, Iago was actually my favorite character over the genie. But... God, what else? I mentioned the genie. Will Smith. Some scenes he's okay, and other scenes he's just not as good as Robin Williams. He's just kind of a lesser version of Robin Williams. Sometimes the Will Smith charm comes through, because we all know Will Smith is a very naturally charming guy. And even bad movies he's in, it's like, well, Will Smith is kind of neat. But here it's just... He's just living in the shadow of Robin Williams, and it's just not as... It just doesn't work as well. And personally, the CGI is awful. Actually, you know what? Not only is the CGI on him awful, the CGI on Genie Jafar at the end of the movie is so fucking bad. Oh my god, is it bad. Like, really, really bad. But yeah, just everything in this movie just made me want to watch the original again. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Maybe it's like, I kind of just wish I was watching that right now. But this movie is just pointless. It was just so pointless. And actually, it starts so horribly. Because there are times where they're reliving old moments from the movie and it feels super, super rushed. And then there are times where it feels like it's drawn out. So the pacing is very inconsistent too. And like I said, a lot of the stuff that they add to it doesn't really... Oh, Genie gets a girlfriend. Because that's what was missing. It's like, what's missing from Aladdin? Oh, Genie needs to get a girlfriend. So that happened. But if I was going to point out anything I liked about the movie... The Never Had a Friend Like Me is probably the best song in the movie. And it's not as good as the original, but the sequence is at least different enough and it's fun on its own. It's like, alright, that was kind of neat. I kind of like that. If I was going to pick a best actor in the movie, I thought Jasmine was pretty good. Now, she's played by Naomi Scott, who I've been told played the Pink Ranger in the last Power Ranger movie, the big budget Power Ranger movie that they did, which I've never seen. I wasn't really that interested in seeing it, but apparently she was the Pink Ranger in that, and she's Princess Jasmine here. And even though they added that speechless song, which ultimately doesn't amount to anything, it just feels like this weird interruption in the middle of the film when they do it. She felt the most right. Of all the things in the movie to compare to the original film, she's the one that at least felt like the essence of Jasmine was there. And obviously she's gorgeous and the outfits she was wearing were gorgeous. So maybe that's why she stood out so much to me, because it's like she looks beautiful and everybody else just looks drab standing next to her because her outfits were gorgeous. But I thought the actress did a fairly commendable job in the role as well. For a movie where they didn't really give her much to work with. And there's also a dance scene at a party that's kind of neat. But other than that, this movie is so lacking. It's so lacking. And really, the entire time I was in the theater, it just made me wish that I was watching the original film. Now, if you like the Disney remakes, and seeing a lesser version of the animated film doesn't bother you, and you just want to relive a story that you love in a different way, it's probably okay. If the original movie never existed, this movie would probably be okay. It would be one of those movies that's it's fine. And may even get a cult following later, like Newsies. But the fact that it's just kind of living in the shadow of a far superior original film. Even the Cave of Wonders doesn't look as good. Nothing looks as good. It's incredible to me. But... if none of that stuff bothers you and you just want to relive a story that you love in a slightly different way, go check it out. You'll probably like it more than I did. For me, I would recommend just watching the original. That's just my take. So, that's Aladdin. Now, the main event. I've got to talk about it. Godzilla King of the Monsters. The movie that I've waited 5 goddamn years for. As I said in a previous video, I saw an early screening of the film, and this is going to be my official review with spoilers and everything. All the build-up, all the everything, that I've waited for this movie for so fucking long, and it delivered in spades. I loved it. I loved this movie. Most fun I've had in a theater all year, except for maybe Endgame, and Endgame was like a different animal entirely, but Godzilla, this movie absolutely delivered what it was promising. It absolutely lived up to my expectations as a fan, and it was a love letter to the genre, to the franchise, to all the fans that love Godzilla. I thought this movie hit it out of the park and was just a thoroughly entertaining experience. So imagine my surprise when I go on Rotten Tomatoes and I see the extremely low score that it has. Last I checked, it was at 39. And I'm like, what? And it made me glad that I saw an early screening a week before all the reviews came out, because had I seen these reviews, I would have gone into the theater scared to death. Oh God, what am I walking into? Oh my God, did they fuck it up? And then I would have come out angry, because I would have been like, oh, you fuckers, you lied. This movie's great. Fuck you. So I was glad that I went into it completely clean and just only my hype and my excitement to really carry me through the film, and I loved it. And when the reviews started coming out, I was like, what the fuck? Really? They hate it this much? And of course the joke online was okay, the main complaint is that it's too much monster action. It's just blowing shit up for 2 hours. And I'm like, okay, well, the complaint last time was that it was too much human stuff and not enough of the monster. So now it's the inverse complaint. That it's all right, I guess some people just aren't happy. I don't know. And I don't want to like turn this into like a us versus them, because again, I hate that shit. I like, not everything's got to be a holy war. That's the worst thing to come out of the internet. Every goddamn thing becomes a holy war. I was talking to somebody the other day about pineapples on pizza. Oh, people, it's like, dude, they like get huge arguments over whether or not pineapple should be on pizza. And I'm like, look, I personally don't like pineapples on pizza, but I don't give a shit if you do it. Like, I don't care enough to get mad at you for putting pineapples on your fucking pizza. It's like, dude, you could put, like, fucking, I don't know, like, put raisins on your pizza. I don't care. You do you. Whatever floats your boat. But again, in the internet, everything's got to be a holy war. And I don't want this to sound like a fuck the critics, we're right type of thing, because, actually, because this movie got a similar reaction to Aladdin, where the critics were not very nice to it, but the audiences really seemed to dig it. I sided with the critics on that one. I was like, no, I don't think it's really that good. If you like it, fine, but I personally didn't think it was that good. And here it's a similar thing where the audiences really seem to dig this movie, and it's consistently scoring high with audiences, but the critics hate it. And I'm like, what happened? Like, what happened? And it was a similar thing with Venom last year, but I didn't like Venom that much either, so. But I was just flabbergasted by the negative reviews that this movie was getting. I was like, did we see a different movie? Did they change it in the week in between? Like, what happened? What on earth happened? So then I saw the movie again on opening night. Audience applauded. And, okay, at the early screening I went to, the audience applauded. And then when I saw it again on opening night, the audience applauded and reacted very heavily to a bunch of things. Mothra got over like gangbusters when I saw it opening night. They seemed to love her. And I was like, okay, so this audience loved it. Then I saw it with my sister and a couple of her friends on Friday night, and we all loved it. And then I saw it again. I've seen the movie 4 times, just making that clear. And then I saw it again with a bunch of my old college buddies on Sunday, earlier today, as I'm filming this. So you're probably not seeing this video until Monday or Tuesday, but I saw it on Sunday. And they all loved it, and the audience applauded, and everyone loved it. So I'm just like, where is this disconnect with this film and the critics? I don't understand what's going on. And I guess I'll just try to address a lot of the complaints that I'm seeing from a lot of the reviews. Well, for one thing, I'm seeing conflicting stuff, because some critics are saying that the story is convoluted, and some critics are saying that the story is either too simple or non-existent. I'm like, okay, it can't be both. It can't be convoluted and it can't be simple. It's got to be one or the other. Personally, I think if you think that this movie's convoluted, I'm going to look at you a little side-eyed, because I'm pretty sure a 5-year-old could follow this film. It's kind of like what I said about the Dick Tracy movie, because I've heard people say that movie's convoluted, and I'm like, I could follow it when I was 5 years old. So when I say a 5-year-old could follow that movie, believe me, a 5-year-old can follow that movie. So I don't know where the convoluted things comes from, but so I don't understand how anybody could say that this movie's convoluted. I really don't, because say it's convoluted implies that it's overly complex and makes no sense, and I'm like, it makes about as much sense as any other Godzilla movie, and it's simple enough to where a 5-year-old could follow it. I think personally. Now, as for saying that that the story is too simple and it has no plot, or if you say the story is too simple or it has no story at all, my response to that is that there are plenty of movies that sell themselves on the spectacle and are critically acclaimed for the spectacle. Gravity is an Oscar nominated? I don't know if it won. I don't remember if it won. But Gravity was a huge critical darling. Everyone loved it. And that movie is all about the spectacle. It's very bare bones storytelling. There's not like this really intricate drama or anything. It's just, let's put these characters in this situation and boom, enjoy the ride. And you get the strong performances to sell everything, obviously. But it's a very simple story that everyone seemed to love. Mad Max Fury Road. I've known one person in my life who did not like that movie because he said there was too much driving. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of action in that movie. It is a adrenaline rush from start to finish with very little exposition. And it's one of the things I love about the movie. They don't explain shit about what's going on. It's just kind of like you just kind of see and experience everything through Max's eyes. And I think it works really well. That movie was critically acclaimed and very popular, and it's all about the spectacle, and very simple story and character motivations to kind of carry everything through all the big action set pieces that take place throughout the film. It also helps that the movie's super quotable, but that's a movie that sells itself more on spectacle than it does story. Or at least not a complicated story. The first Avengers movie. That has about as bare bones a plot as you could possibly ask for. Bad guy gets cube, wants to blow up the world, but what sells it is that you have the heroes joining forces on screen for the first time. And that's enough of a spectacle to sell the movie, and it's great and it's exciting. And there are even tiny problems with that film from, if you really look at it and pick it apart, it's like, wait, the Chitauri are hive mind, and when you destroy the mothership, they all die? That's convenient, but whatever. Like, the appeal of seeing all the heroes together is what makes it work, and it's sold itself on the spectacle. A movie like Speed, which, actually, now that I think about it, I don't know if Speed was a critical success, but I know audiences loved it, and it's like, yeah, it's an action thrill ride. Very loose story, very small, not a lot of dialogue necessarily. It's about, let's put these characters in this situation and just watch chaos ensue. And it's one of the most exciting action movies ever made. Like, if you tell me you don't like Speed, it's one of those where I'm like, do you like movies? I don't know, but like I said, there are a ton of movies that sell itself on the spectacle and are critically acclaimed and perfectly enjoyable films. The Fast and the Furious movies, which I've never seen any of the Fast and the Furious movies, but they sell themselves on the action and very little story and themes of family, and that's about it. I actually want to watch all the Fast and Furious movies, but I'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. But the John Wick movies, the John Wick trilogy, I just got done saying the story is very basic and easy to follow. It's the spectacle that really makes it special and sets it apart from everything else. So these are movies that I enjoy, critics enjoyed, audience enjoyed, and they're very simple stories that sell themselves on a spectacle. So Godzilla, this movie, has a very simple story and sells itself on its spectacle. And fuck them for doing that in this case? Fuck Godzilla for doing that? Alright, look. And I'm going to get into, like, the human drama, because people said that, like, oh, there's no human drama at all whatsoever, which I disagree with wholeheartedly. And people didn't feel like there was enough character development, which, again, I disagree. And I have two responses to that. And before I start defending the actors, which I'm totally prepared to do, I'm going to talk about the monsters themselves. It's like, all right, so you say the characters are weak and it focuses on the monsters. To me, and I have felt this way ever since I was a kid and I started watching these movies, and not just the Godzilla movies, but King Kong and Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and the Ray Harryhausen movies. And in these movies, the monsters are characters in the story. I have always felt this way. And I guess a lot of people just write them off as special effects. But to me, Godzilla is a character. King Ghidorah is a character. Mothra is a character. Rodan is a character. So when you tell me that this movie has weak characters, I disagree with you, because this movie gave me a hero that I loved in Godzilla. And I'm going to talk more about him in a little bit. And it gave me a villain that was legitimately menacing in King Ghidorah. Like, I was talking to one person who said, well, the villain of this movie was kind of weak. I'm like, was he? The villain was weak? I'm like, yeah, Charles Dance. He didn't really do much. I'm like, oh, Charles Dance isn't the main villain of the movie. King Ghidorah is. And then he looked at me and he was like, oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, like, yeah. Yeah, it's like, if you want to look at it that way, I'm like, King Ghidorah is the main antagonist of this film and, like, causes all the shit that goes down. And Godzilla's the one that has to stop him, so he's the main hero. So to me, the monsters are characters. So when you tell me the story has weak characters, I disagree with you, because the monsters are characters in the story, and they are great. They are fantastic. And I'm going to gush over all the monsters in a little bit, but let me go into the actual human cast, the actors and the characters that carry the human drama side of things. First of all, Ken Watanabe is great in this movie. He had a really big standout scene with Godzilla where Godzilla gets injured at a point in the film. And the only way to revive him is to set off a nuke in his face and have Godzilla absorb the radiation from the nuke and repower himself, revitalize himself. And Ken Watanabe, through damages to the equipment, he has to actually go up there and manually set off the nuke and sacrifice himself in the process. I thought that was a great, terrific scene and a great honorable end to the character that was set up in the first Godzilla movie. Where, well, when I say the first Godzilla movie, I say the 2014 film, the first one in the MonsterVerse. Although there obviously Dr. Sarasawa is a callback to the very first Godzilla movie, but again, I digress. You know, he was a character who I said when I reviewed the 2014 film that he was like the Dr. Loomis of this universe, where he kind of speaks for the monsters. So to kill that character off, I thought was a really powerful moment. And you know, they set him up earlier in this film where he believes that Godzilla is the key to coexistence, and he believes that the coexistence between man and monster is possible. And he makes this clear in the Senate hearing. And so he died not only to save Godzilla, not only to save the world, but he died for what he believed in. And I'm like, that's a great emotional moment right there for the characters. And then the real main focus of the human drama is this family played by Kyle Chandler, Vera Farmiga, and Millie Bobby Brown. And they're a family that was really torn apart after the events of the first movie, where the oldest son died in the Godzilla versus Muto battle in San Francisco. And, you know, the father became a drunk, and then the parents got divorced, and the mom went off the deep end big time, where she got wrapped up in her work and became convinced after like a scientific discovery that she could actually save the world if she set all the Titans free, which they all explain in the film. And then you have poor Millie Bobby Brown's character, who's kind of caught in the middle of all this between two parents that are, you know, one who's bitter and wants Godzilla dead for killing his son, and the other one who wants to set all the monsters free to save the world. And she's just kind of like caught in the middle between their own personal grievances and issues that they're struggling with and dealing with. So through all this insanity going on, by the end of the film, they ultimately all reunite. And Vera Farmiga, after causing so much trouble, she sacrifices herself. Again, self-sacrifice is like a recurring theme in the Godzilla series. It happens twice in this movie. The original film, Godzilla Raids Again, Terror of Mechagodzilla, and basically every time that Mothra has died. So self-sacrifice is this really interesting, like, recurring theme throughout the series. But again, I digress. And it's like, all right, so you have one guy who hates Godzilla with a passion and then has to learn how to coexist with him to help save his family and to save the world. So he has a character change there and a development. You have Vera Farmiga's character who makes a massive mistake and then at the end of the film tries to correct her mistake while also protecting her family. And you have the daughter who's caught in the middle and then has to find the bravery to actually act and basically stop what's going on in the world when all the Titans rise and start attacking. And it's like, okay, that sounds like a character arc to me. Like, those are all satisfying character arcs for me. I'm fine with it. Some people thought that Vera Farmiga's motivations were a bit weird, but I'm like, it's not any less weird than, or not any more weird than what I'm used to out of the Godzilla series. You know, it's, I mean, one of my favorite entries is Terror of Mechagodzilla, and that movie has a mad scientist that joins up with aliens to destroy humanity because he got fired and discredited. And he has a cyborg for a daughter. It's like, this is practically mundane by Godzilla standards. So I was into the human drama. It carried the film well enough for me. And again, it's not Shakespeare, but I didn't expect Shakespeare out of this. I expected spectacle with a story that's enough to drive me from one action set piece to another. And I felt like the human drama was effective at doing that. Now, as for the other characters, I think that they're largely cogs in the machine to kind of help move everything forward, and they're side characters to kind of give the film a little additional flavor. And to that end, I think they're fine. I thought Bradley Whitford was funny, basically playing Rick Sanchez. I mean, that's basically what he was doing. I was at a point where I was like, if he says wubba lubba dub dub and starts belching, I'm going to lose my mind. It's like that will be when they have flown too close to the sun. But fortunately, that didn't happen. I thought, I forget her name. She was in Memoirs of a Geisha with Ken Watanabe. Interestingly, I forget the actress's name, but I thought she was good as like the historical myth researcher to get information on the Titans. So she had a role to play, and she was fine for what she was. And there's actually some ties to. There's an interesting tie to Mothra and the fairies with her. That was actually a nice little, fun little thing for the fans, and kind of opens the door for deeper mythology with Mothra and maybe other monsters as well. And Yeah, Charles Dance, who is great in every scene he's in. I think he's great. As a character, he doesn't really do much beyond acting as the devil on Vera Farmiga's shoulder, kind of push her to keep going through with this plan to unleash all the monsters, all the titans. To that end, he's fine. But again, that one person who said, "Oh, the villain of the film was weak because he didn't really do anything." I'm like, but he's not the villain. King Ghidorah is. So he's just another side character to me. But everybody acts well. I thought the acting was good for the most part. You know, they didn't slum it when it came to the acting. I thought everybody played their parts well. I thought I was engaged by the story. I was fine with them, and what they did complemented what the monsters were doing. And again, that goes back to the original series with movies like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, where you have a princess who escapes an assassination attempt, wakes up thinking that she's an alien prophetess, and starts being like the voice box for the monsters and predicting doom when Godzilla, Rodan, and King Ghidorah are going to show up. And so there's like this assassination plot with these killers trying to kill the princess who thinks she's an alien, and somehow this all ties into the monsters. I'm like, you know what? It worked for me. It worked for me then, and this stuff works for me now. I thought it was just enough to complement the monster action and make the spectacle work. Now, if I was going to criticize the movie for anything, really, God, I thought the introduction of the oxygen destroyer was a nice touch, but they didn't really build up to it, so it just kind of comes out of nowhere where they're like, oh, by the way, we have this oxygen destroyer that'll kill the Titans. I wish they had, it really just one throwaway line earlier in the film would have fixed it, where it's like, we are currently developing weapons to deal with these Titans, and then it's revealed that it's the oxygen destroyer. I think that would have been neat, but that's one thing, and some of the jokes didn't work for me. Mainly, unfortunately, the worst jokes are the ones in the trailer, like the gonorrhea line, which I'm like, ugh, don't like that line, and the oh my Godzilla line. I'm like, I could have done without that, but some of the jokes do work. I thought Bradley Whitford I thought he was funny. I'll be honest, I thought he was funny. Tom Middleditch, who I was scared to death of, I thought he was going to be annoying as fuck in this movie. He's actually not bad. He's probably the most pointless character in the movie, but he's okay, and he gets a chuckle out of me every once in a while, and he's okay. And, nobody annoyed me, which, that's great. I thought it was fine. I thought the human stuff was all really good and fine, and drove the story well enough. Now, let's get into the stuff that I loved and the major selling point of this movie, which are the monsters themselves. I loved what they did with Godzilla in this movie, where he basically has a hero's journey, where he confronts his old rival, King Ghidorah, as we learn in the film. And that's another aspect I loved, where they expanded on the myth of the monster, the myths and the legends, and brought that to the forefront in present day. And we see Godzilla's ancient lair, and we see like all these ancient myths connecting Ghidorah and Mothra together and all these other things, and that's really cool. And I love it when you can expand on the monsters and make them feel like gods, and just tying them to so much like ancient history and myth, I thought was a really, really cool thing. There's actually a really good scene, again, involving Kyle Chandler and I'm sorry, I forgot the actress's name, but the character who's the myth studier, the legend studier, historian, the monster historian, I guess I'll call her. There's a scene where they talk about what dragons have meant in Western and Eastern cultures, and ties that into Kyle Chandler's feelings towards Godzilla. And I'm like, that was a good scene. Like, again, I liked it. I like that stuff. What's the problem? What is the problem? But anyway, I love this version of Godzilla. Like, it really builds off of the 2014 film where he was kind of the last samurai and kind of this ancient warrior that has to set everything back right. And they really expand on that here, where he gets a bit of a hero's journey where, like I said, he confronts his old rival, King Ghidorah, gets severely injured by the oxygen destroyer, which was first night I saw this, no judging, because I know I'm a lifelong fan, but there were two scenes that made me cry. One was when it looked like Godzilla had died from the oxygen destroyer, and I was like, what? Because, and here's the thing, I didn't cry when Iron Man died because I was prepared for it. I was not prepared to lose Godzilla in the middle of the movie, and I was like, wait, what's going on? I felt like I'd lost Optimus Prime again. Going back to putting myself in the mind of a 4-year-old. It was, that got me, and the last scene where all the monsters bow down to him and make him the king got to me, because that was like Godzilla got his crowning moment, and he got his Rocky ending, basically. And, as somebody who's been a fan of the character for 30 years, that was really satisfying for me. So Godzilla's like the ultimate hero in this thing. So he's outstanding in this, and he's fun to root for. And the action set pieces in this film are so great. I mean, they really are great. There's like 3 major action set pieces in this film, and I think all of them are stellar. Keeping up with the monsters, I thought, now, keep in mind, again, I've been watching these movies for 30 years. I think this might be my favorite version of King Ghidorah I've ever seen on film. And that says a lot, because I'm a huge fan of King Ghidorah. But this version, he is menacing. He is kind of scary at times. He is the world destroyer that Ghidorah was always meant to be. Because in the original film, he's built up to be this planet destroyer that goes from world to world and destroys everything. And in the movie, in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, his destruction is limited mostly to just Japan, as most of these movies are. And in most other movies, he's under the control of aliens, so he's not even acting under his own will. So some of that, like, mythical, like, world destroyer aspect is kind of missing. But here they make him an alien, which they explain, which I liked, that they added that touch. So he's, like, outside of the natural order, which is why when he's unleashed, and he starts taking control of all the Titans as the Alpha and everything. He basically is terraforming the Earth to his own desires. And it made me think about, like, when they find the underwater city where Godzilla's lair is. It's like, did Ghidorah, like, flood the world? Is that, like, could they tie that into, like, the myth of Noah's Ark and all these other things where, like, Ghidorah destroyed the world? Because that would be interesting. Because I've heard Michael Dougherty talk about, who's the director of this movie, talk about wanting to do a Godzilla BC, and I'm like, dude, I'd be so down for that. I'm like, oh my god, that'd be great. But anyway, I loved this version of King Ghidorah. And like I said, this is like the purest version of the character that we've ever had. The closest we ever gotten to like a true world-destroying god of destruction, King Ghidorah, was in Mothra 3, which was a flawed film, but he's great in it. And Planet Eater, the last anime film, which basically Ghidorah's a flying spaghetti monster in that, but he probably fared better than most of the other monsters that were in those movies. And actually, I kind of like that take on Ghidorah, but this one I really, really liked. I also liked that they gave the individual heads like different personalities, and the middle head was kind of the boss and kind of picking on the left head a lot. That was kind of neat. I thought that, again, that was just a very different take on King Ghidorah. They added something to the character that made him more interesting. So this take on Ghidorah I thought was outstanding. And, when you get to the scene where he rises out of the ice, that scene is amazing. And he has his first fight with Godzilla. That scene is amazing. And it all builds to this amazing climax in Boston, which I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. But I really enjoyed this version of King Ghidorah. And because I love Godzilla so much and I thought Ghidorah was such a great antagonist, it made it all the more satisfying when Godzilla ultimately defeated him. Again, I loved all of what they did. Oh, God, when they threw Burning Godzilla out there, I was like, this movie just gets me. This movie it knows exactly what I want and when I want it. And it was so satisfying to watch Godzilla kill him, finally, after struggling throughout the entire movie to do it. I thought Rodan probably was the least important of the 4 main monsters, but boy, oh boy, did he leave an impression. He had probably one of the best action set pieces in the film when he's fighting all the fighter jets, which really took me back to the original Rodan film. And that scene was incredible. I thought that was really well done. I loved the way he looked, and he also turned into a little traitor because he fought King Ghidorah, got defeated, and then once Godzilla gets killed, it looked like Rodan went along with the other Titans and was just like, okay, we bow to the new king, who is King Ghidorah. And then at the end of the film, he bows to Godzilla. It's like, oh wow, you're quite the rogue, aren't you? You go where the money is, don't you, buddy? Betrayed to Rodan is pretty great. And he has a fight scene with Mothra that leads to some really cool moments in the climax. And let me talk about Mothra, who steals just about every scene she's in. She's the first monster we see. We see the larval form, and that's a great scene where they introduce the Orca, which is the device that helps calm the monsters down and maybe even or antagonize them or do whatever the device using bioacoustics, whatever it's designed to do, it does it. depending on what the user's trying to accomplish. And it was, so there was the scene with the larva, and then the scene where she bursts out of the cocoon, where it's like, oh my god, she looks beautiful. And the scene where you see her in the sky, and she's activated the bioluminescence, and she's just glowing in the sky, and it looks amazing. And then in the final battle, she swoops in, webs Ghidorah's head, so stick him to a building so Godzilla can tackle him through a building. I'm like, so great. And then she defeats Rodan with a stinger, which is one of the coolest moments in the movie. And then she sacrifices herself to save Godzilla, and it's just Mothra was fucking cool in this. I love, and Mothra was just incredible, and that whole like climactic battle in Boston I thought was unbelievable. Like with Ghidorah like throwing Godzilla around and picking him up in the sky and dropping him, and burning Godzilla showing up in the end. It was a wild spectacle, I thought, and totally cool. And I was going to mention this with Mothra, but I guess I'll talk about it now. One of the other things I loved about this film, the music by Bear McCreary, I thought was unreal. He really hit it out of the park, and I've always said that music is a really important part of some movies, like Rocky, Halloween, Star Wars, Jaws, Indiana Jones. The music is just as much a character in the films as anything else. And he hit it out of the park. Because Godzilla and music, there's a huge tradition there, especially with what Akira Ifukube did with the original films. And he builds off that legacy to the point where I would say, I've always said my second favorite Ifukube is my favorite because he basically gave Godzilla his musical soul. But my second favorite was Michiru Oshima, I think her name is. She was the one that did Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla in 2002, and Godzilla Tokyo SOS. Awesome score. I think Bear may have topped her as, and I liked the score to the 2014 film, but this one just blows it away. And all the individual themes that they give the monsters, they give Godzilla his classic theme music, they give Mothra her classic theme music, and it's probably the best version of that I've ever seen. They don't use the classic theme song for Ghidorah, but what they do give him is awesome. And so I was like, I'm not complaining. That sounds amazing. And the music just perfectly punctuates every scene that it's in. And they put the new version of the Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla song in the end credits, which I just love that. That is so great. So great. So the music was amazing in this film. So much so that I'm probably going to buy the soundtrack to this because it's just that good. And I was really blown away with the work that Bear McCreary put into the music. So monsters are great. Action's great. Music's great. I like the human characters. I'm trying to think of other things. All the little Easter eggs in there. They reference Kong a lot in the film. So obviously we're setting up for Godzilla vs. Kong. There were references to the twin fairies existing in this universe in some capacity. I was like, okay, that's kind of neat. I like that. I really like that. They reference Ghidorah being an alien. They expand the myth of the monsters. So much of it just really, really worked for me. And I don't want to be a snob about it and say, fuck the critics, they're wrong. But I will say that I disagree with the critics wholeheartedly on this film. I had a blast watching it. I've seen it 4 times, and I loved it every single time I watched it. So, I don't know what to say. I have never been this surprised by a Rotten Tomatoes score. And I know, I get it if giant monsters aren't your thing. I understand that. But it doesn't sound like that's what they're saying. It sounds like a lot of them are just like, they're saying all these things that I just don't agree with. And I don't know. I don't know. It was really baffling to me. And I've enjoyed the film. I've gotten my money's worth out of it for sure. I actually saw it in IMAX. And by the way, if you're going to see this movie, it's absolutely worth seeing in IMAX because, good God almighty, that thing looks beautiful on screen. And, when you get to the Godzilla King Ghidorah fight in Antarctica, and you get the wild sequence in Mexico, and you get the wild battle in Boston with all the monsters there. It's just a wild thrill ride the whole way through. It sells the spectacle, and I think the story is perfectly fine. The story's perfectly fine. I don't know what everybody's complaining about. And, if your problem with the 2014 film is that Godzilla wasn't in the movie enough, this movie's got you covered. I mean, it's a monster Royal Rumble. I mean, it's incredible. We even get new monsters thrown in. Which, of all the new monsters that they threw in, I really like the woolly mammoth gorilla guy. I think his name's Behemoth. It's like, all right, I want to see more of that guy because he looks neat. It's like, that's a new, interesting creation that I really enjoyed. But the new monsters don't do much in this film, but I feel like they're being set up for Godzilla vs. Kong, and maybe they're going to do a Civil War thing where there's going to be a Team Godzilla and a Team Kong. That would be interesting, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, I adored this movie. And this isn't the first time I've disagreed with critics. They were kind of harsh on Rambo 4, the fourth Rambo. And I thought it was really good. I thought it was great visual storytelling in that film. People said that film, it has no dialogue, so it has no story. I'm like, no, I disagree. A lot of its storytelling is visual, and it's a very grisly film. It's not easy to watch, but it is a very exciting film, and one that I enjoyed, and I disagreed with the critics on that one. Had I been alive in 1982, I would have wholeheartedly disagreed with them about their assessment of John Carpenter's The Thing, which history has shown that they overcame, poor box office and poor critical reception and become hailed as one of the all-time great horror classics. At the time, I would have said it's like, this is a movie that deserves to be considered on par with the likes of Alien. And then when Predator came out a few years later, I'm like, The Thing is a movie that deserves to be considered on par with Predator. And I think it's achieved that, but it took a while to get there. But that's another movie I would have wholeheartedly disagreed with the critics on. And again, I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong, but I'm just saying I disagree. And I don't know what movie you saw. And everybody I've seen the movie with has loved the movie. And it's had pretty great reception from audiences that have seen it. I just don't. I was blown away when I saw the Rotten Tomatoes score, because I think Rampage has a higher score than that. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You're gonna sit there, look me straight in the eye, and tell me that this movie is not as good as Rampage? Okay. I'm surprised by it, but I'm not going to let the critics ruin my good time. I thought the movie was great. It lived up to all my expectations. I think if you're a fan, it's a love letter to the franchise. It's a love letter to the genre. I think you're going to love it. You've probably already seen it if you are a fan, but I thoroughly enjoyed this film. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it every time I've watched it. I think it's terrific. One other issue, one negative that I forgot to mention. Sally Hawkins' character dies, and I thought that was a little weak. The way they killed her off was a little weak. It kind of came out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, okay, she's dead now. But, when I compare this film, I think it's by far the best of the three MonsterVerse films. And I'm the type of guy with Godzilla. I'm very multifaceted in what I like out of a Godzilla movie. I like the serious ones. I like the goofy ones. I like the ones where Godzilla's all over the place. I like the ones where he's barely in it. I like the ones that are more sci-fi. I like the ones that are more fantasy. I like the ones where Godzilla's standing alone by himself. I like the ones where he's fighting other monsters. I don't really have a preferred type of Godzilla movie. I just kind of like Godzilla movies, and the franchise has been so versatile. So, if the 2014 one wasn't your bag, I like the 2014 one just fine. But I think this movie should theoretically give people what they wanted out of the first movie, and I thought was great. I thought it was really, really good. And I liked it more than Skull Island. I'll tell you what, I like Skull Island. I enjoy that movie, but I had way more problems with the human characters in that film than I did in this one. John Goodman's character not getting to complete a story arc, not getting to see John C. Reilly's character grow. Honestly, if they'd done the movie from the point of view of the two crashed pilots living on Skull Island, I think that would have been a better movie. But we didn't get to see that, and I was kind of bothered by that. I still don't understand the point of Brie Larson's character other than Kong needs to hold a girl. I think that was the only reason she was in the movie. But and Tom Hiddleston doesn't really have an arc. He's just a very generic, action hero type of character. So but I did love Sam Jackson in that film. I think Sam Jackson's great in it. And John C. Reilly, when he finally shows up, I think he's really good in it. But I had more issues with that movie than I did with this one. And That was a movie that sold itself on its spectacle. It's just Kong being cool, and that was the main selling point of the film. It's like, yeah, Kong's awesome. And we get some great fights out of it. It's fine. Totally enjoyable film. But I thought this one was way better. And it's getting shit on way more by the critics, and I don't understand why. I'm a little confused, to be perfectly honest. But hey, I don't always agree with the critics, and that's fine. Sometimes I agree with the consensus, like Planet of the Apes. Those were generally well received. The Caesar trilogy, and I love those films. Sometimes I don't agree with the consensus. The last Rambo film and Godzilla, and I guess initially The Thing, but. In any case, those are my thoughts on Godzilla King of the Monsters. I love the film. It lived up to so many of my expectations and gave me just about everything I wanted. I felt great about it every single time I've seen it. As a fan, I couldn't be happier with it. And thank you, Michael Dougherty, for giving us the movie that you always wanted to make and giving us an awesome action-adventure thrill ride starring my all-time favorite movie monster. I loved it. I love the film. I can't sing its praises enough. I adored it. And again, I can't say enough how confused I was by the critical reaction, but the positive audience reaction did not surprise me at all. Because it's just a damn good movie. I'm sorry, but anyway, so I have finally reviewed Godzilla King of the Monsters. Isn't that great? Isn't that grand? Isn't that wonderful? But before I go, I'm going to do quick previews of things that I haven't watched yet because they haven't been released yet, and things that are coming out for the rest of the year in 2019. So I'm going to run down a list of a bunch of movies and TV shows that are coming out, and I'll tell you my thoughts on them and if I'm interested in seeing them. So let's start off with the two that I am most excited about, and they might surprise you. Rambo Last Blood and Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Now, let's go into Rambo first. I love the Rambo films. The third one's a little weak, but I love the first two, and I thought the fourth one was great, massively underrated. And now we're getting this next one, Rambo Last Blood, which is going to be the end of the Rambo story, so I'm assuming he's going to die. And if that happens, it's like, all right, I want to be there to see Rambo die, because he's an action hero icon, and I make no secrets about it. I love Sylvester Stallone, mainly because of Rocky, but when he's in a movie that really entertains me, he's just so much fun, and I love him so much. And Rambo is his other iconic character, and he's already pretty much put Rocky Balboa to bed with Creed 2, so now I get to say goodbye to Rambo, and I think Rambo's actually going to die in this film, so I want to see it, and I think it's going to be awesome. Hopefully it's awesome. One can hope, but I do, at the very least, I do want to be there to say goodbye to Rambo. And the other one, like I said, Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Now, I'd heard that Netflix was going to be doing a Dark Crystal show with the Jim Henson Company, and there was like an announcement teaser for it like years ago, and that was the last I ever heard of it, so I didn't really hear any updates or anything about it. I kind of forgot about it. And then all of a sudden this goddamn trailer drops, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, whoa, that looks awesome. Now, The Dark Crystal is one of my favorite fantasy movies from my childhood because I'm a big Jim Henson fan, and I loved the world that was created in that film, and the fact that he was able to do this movie entirely with puppets. And they all feel alive, and the world is just so awesome. Even if the story is like, it's the Messiah story. We've seen it like a million times. It's Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's Star Wars to some degree. It's Harry Potter. We've seen that story before. But the world is just so cool that it became one of those movies that I just adored, especially when I look back on my childhood. And this trailer looks like it recaptured the look of the original film, which I didn't think was going to be possible, but good God almighty, it looks like they did it. And again, all puppets, all sets, it looks like, with CGI being used as like a punctuation on certain sets and things rather than... it doesn't look like there's going to be any CGI characters. It's all puppets. And I'm like, oh shit, I am down for this. And it looks amazing. Now, supposedly it's going to be a prequel to the movie, which I'm okay with because there's a lot of backstory with the original movie that we've never really gotten. So I'm okay with that. And also, I think they figured it's like, all right, the Skeksis, the way the Dark Crystal ends, the Skeksis get written out, basically. And you can't do the Dark Crystal without the Skeksis, because they're pretty much the most iconic thing in those movies, in that movie, in that world. So I think they made it a prequel just to make sure that they get the Skeksis in there, because you can't do the Dark Crystal without the Skeksis. So I'm really excited for that show, and I can't wait to see it. It looks really good. So now going through the list of everything else, those are the two things I'm most excited for the rest of the year. But going through everything else, we got Stranger Things Season 3. I gotta be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan of Season 2. I thought it was too much of a retread of Season 1. Season 1 was great, obviously, and I loved it just like everybody else did. But something about Season 2 just didn't sit well with me. But the trailer to Season 3 looks great. And it's like, all right, they're setting it in the summer, and, it's going to have more of a summer theme to it. And hopefully it's good. The kids are getting bigger. Well, I mean, the last time I saw Millie Bobby Brown in an interview for Godzilla, I'm like, good Lord, are you in college already? God, it's like, man, everybody's... It always makes me sad when a kid actor grows up. It's like, because then that just means I'm old. And it's like, oh, man. But anyway, I am excited for Season 3, and hopefully it's a step up from Season 2. X-Men Dark Phoenix, which comes out next weekend. I don't know if I'm going to be seeing it. I doubt it. If I'm going to see it in theaters, I really have no interest in seeing it, because I feel like X-Men's kind of dead at this point. It's like we're just kind of waiting for Disney to get it and put them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And X-Men Apocalypse was not that great. It was kind of a shallow entry in the series. And to me, like, the X-Men series really ended with Logan. And Logan was amazing, and I loved it. And to me, this is just kind of the franchise living on borrowed time. And based on what I'm seeing on the trailers, it looks like they're rehashing a lot of shit from X-Men 3. And turns out, surprise, surprise, it's written by the same person that wrote X-Men 3. And it's like, what? How did that happen? But what an odd coincidence. But it just looks like, okay, we're getting the Dark Phoenix story again. And it looks like, well, number one, Sophie Turner, and I don't think she's a bad actress, but she's about as intimidating as a kitten. And now she's the Dark Phoenix. I'm like, I don't really buy it, but okay. So I haven't seen anything that's made me excited for the film. Maybe it'll be good. Who knows? But for right now, I'm just kind of like planning on skipping it because it just doesn't interest me that much. Speaking of movies that don't interest me that much, Toy Story 4. Now, I love Toy Story. I love all three films that we've gotten up to this point. But the third film had such a perfect ending that I look at this fourth one, I'm like, oh, no, don't reduce Toy Story 4 to a cheap cash grab. And it's kind of, it feels like that's where it's going. And again, I'm basing this off the stuff that we've seen. The Key and Peele characters, like the I guess they're carnival dolls or whatever. Now I've watched all three Toy Story films and they are loaded with characters. And I can honestly say that in all three films, no character has annoyed me. When they released that teaser with the Key and Peele characters, and Key and Peele are kind of hit and miss with me anyway. Sometimes they're really funny. Other times I want to throw a rock at my TV screen to break it and prevent me from having to watch the end of their act. They're hit and miss. Now, I thought they were really funny in Storks, which is an underrated movie, but when I saw that teaser for Toy Story 4 with their characters, I was like, uh-oh, they are so annoying. And the first time I've ever been annoyed by Toy Story characters, I'm like, that's not a good sign. And they're really selling Little Bo Peep's return, and she's a badass action hero. And I'm kind of like, is that something the world needed? Was Bo Peep as an action hero? You got Jessie, you know that? I like Jessie more than Bo Peep, to be honest, but I don't know. And there's already some like coincidences there. It's like, so wait a minute. So Bo Peep got sold, and then while on this road trip that they're on in this movie with Part 4, Woody just happens to stumble upon Bo Peep again. And I'm like, that's a pretty big convenience. It's like, I don't know, this thing, maybe it'll be good. I hope it's good. I don't want Toy Story to have a bad movie. I don't know if I'm going to be seeing this in theaters. I'll probably wait until I hear what people like Trust say about it, but I really wish they weren't making this. I really, really don't want this movie to come out. But it is. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's good. That's all I can say at this point. Then we've got another remake, a horror remake, Child's Play. Now, when I first heard they were remaking Child's Play, I said, fuck you, I'm not watching that. No Brad Dourif, no sales. I'm not watching this movie. Then I heard they cast Mark Hamill as Chucky. Well played movie. Very well played. And not only that, but this movie has changed it to where Chucky is like a smart device. The Chucky doll is like a smart device that hooks into other devices in the household. And I'm like, that's an interesting modern take on Chucky. You could probably do some really good things with that. So I'm like, all right, I'll bite. You got me. I'm intrigued. I didn't think I would be intrigued by a Child's Play movie, but I'm intrigued. Kudos. I didn't think you could do it, movie, but you roped me in. All right, so I'll check that out. Maybe it'll be a terrible remake. I don't know. Brad Dourif, I love the Chucky character. The Child's Play movies aren't necessarily my favorite horror movies, but I love that character so much. So, I hope Mark Hamill does him justice. I hope this movie does him justice, because I just love Chucky. I think he's a great character. So, not averse to seeing Mark Hamill do the voice and act like Chucky. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So, then we have the next Marvel movie, Spider-Man Far From Home. I'll see it. Coming off of Endgame, it's probably going to feel like a letdown, because I don't know how the hell you follow up Endgame and all the shit they did in that film, but it'll probably be a nice, fun adventure with Spider-Man. Mysterio's the villain, which I think is a great call. And they're going to work in some like multiverse aspects that were set up in Endgame. It's like, all right, this could open the door for some crazy stuff in the MCU. Now, one thing about the snap that's kind of like, that's convenient. So, apparently, all of Peter's close friends and all the characters from Homecoming that went to high school with Peter, apparently they all got snapped and brought back too, because they're all okay and they're all the exact same age they were before the snap. So, it's like, that's convenient. Very convenient, right? I won't say I'm looking forward to this movie necessarily, but it's like, it's one that I could definitely probably see and enjoy. I haven't seen anything bad about it so far. So, I think this could be another like really fun Spider-Man film. I thought Homecoming was fun, and I expect this one to be fun too. Then we've got, another Pixar movie. We saw a preview for it a couple days ago, I think. Onward, which I was very weirded out by the trailer because it didn't look like Pixar. I would have expected to see something like this from DreamWorks or Illumination, where it's like, all right, we've got elves and fantasy creatures, and they live in modern-day suburbia. And it's like, I mean, that's not terrible, but I've also kind of seen that in other movies like Zootopia, where they did it with animals, and Chicken Little did it with animals, and now it's like, oh, but we're doing it with fantasy characters, so it's different. And I'm like, but I imagine a lot of the jokes are going to be the same. And I was a little surprised. It didn't look like Pixar. Now, again, I'm not saying the movie looked bad. It didn't grab me like a lot of the other Pixar movies have in the past. But we'll see how it goes. Again, I don't know if I'm going to be seeing that thing in theaters. I'll tell you what, I'm more interested in Onward than I am Toy Story 4, so take that for what it's worth. But we'll see what happens there. And then we've got another Disney live action remake with The Lion King, where it's not live action because all the animals are CGI, but everybody calls it live action. No, they're photorealistic. They're still animated. And again, it's kind of like what I said about Aladdin. It's like, I'd rather just watch the original film. And this movie looks like it's doing a shot-for-shot remake. It's like the remake of Psycho, almost, where just based on the trailer, it's like you were just recreating shots from the movie, from the original movie, and you're just doing it differently, but you're making the same movie. That's how it looks. Maybe they changed some stuff, I don't know, but I can tell you I don't like Scar's voice at all. He doesn't carry any weight to him. And personally, if you're going to do like the photorealistic animated animal route with this, what I would have liked to have seen, instead of having the songs and having dialogue, I probably would have liked it if the animals just didn't talk. And they told the story visually, and see if they could convey personality with the animals acting like animals and not talking, and see if they could do it that way. That would be a nice, interesting way to see if you could tell the story of The Lion King and make it different from the original. Would that be very hard to do? Yeah. Would general audiences go for it? I don't know. Maybe if you did it right, I don't know. But it would be, to me, it would make the movie way more interesting than just doing a shot-for-shot remake with photorealistic animated animals. I haven't seen anything that's really made me want to go out of my way to see this movie. And when people told me, it's like, oh, but James Earl Jones is voicing Mufasa again. And I'm like, doesn't that make it even more pointless? I mean, Frank Welker did all of his voices from Aladdin again. In Aladdin, he was Abu, he was Raja, he was the Cave of Wonders, and it's like, but doesn't that make it even more pointless to just have him voice the same character again in the exact same story? I don't know, maybe that's just me. But I haven't seen anything from this movie that's convinced me that it's anything different than just a shot-for-shot remake of the original Lion King. But again, we'll see. And I'm sure it'll make $1 billion because these movies are just like easy money for Disney at this point. But I really have no interest in it. One movie I am interested in is Joker. Now, I saw that trailer with I'm gonna mispronounce his name. Joaquin. God, I can't talk. It's way too late. Anyway, the guy playing the Joker, Mr. Phoenix. There we go. When I saw that trailer, I was like, that looks interesting. That looks interesting. And it looks very different from other comic book movies. It looks like a character study. And I'm intrigued to see what they do with this. And again, it might be terrible. Who knows? But the trailer was really good. And I'm really interested in seeing how this plays out. And if the Joker can carry a movie without Batman. By himself, to see if that can work. Just exploring the character of the Joker, if that can carry a movie without Batman. Maybe Batman will be in this. They'll find a way to work him in. I don't know, but as is, I think it's very interesting. Very interesting. Now, while we're on the subject of evil clowns, another movie coming out that I want to see is It Chapter 2, which had an awesome trailer that just dropped a couple weeks ago, I think. And, again, more the same. It just looks like it's going to be Pennywise being creepy and scary, because I really loved that take on Pennywise in part 1. And now we're moving away from the kid angle, which is probably for the best. I mean, that's how the book plays out. But also, the kid... There were a lot of weird moments with the kids that were kind of the... When the kid, and it's not the actors that played the kids. It was just there were some really weird moments, like them going and swimming in the lake in their underwear, and I'm like, should I be arrested for watching this? And thankfully, now that it's all adult actors, we won't get any of those weird moments where there's uncomfortable stuff with the kids, and it can be Pennywise torturing a bunch of adults now. And I did prefer the part 1 of this new It to the miniseries with Tim Curry, because it was actually scary. Whereas I thought Tim Curry was hilarious as Pennywise, and I thought it was funny. But here, no, Pennywise is actually terrifying in part 1. And if we get more of that in part 2, I'm all on board. And if the trailer is any indication, that's exactly what we're getting. So thumbs up for that. I definitely want to see that. Another movie coming out is Fast and the Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw, which the trailer I've seen a lot of lately with all the movies. I think it's been in front of almost every movie I've seen this month. And as I said earlier, I have never watched any of the Fast and the Furious movies. Watching this trailer, and I don't know what it is, why this one is really made me want to check it out, but I want to watch all the Fast and the Furious movies and then watch this movie, because I definitely want to see this movie, because it looks so over the top, stupid, awesome, like something out of the 1980s. It's like, I have to see this fucking thing. Like that whole sequence with them chaining the cars together to bring down a helicopter looks amazing. The Rock and Jason Statham look amazing together. Idris Elba as the villain going, I'm Black Superman. And I'm like, I want to see this movie. It looks stupid in the best way. And apparently a lot of the Fast and the Furious movies are that way. It's like, all right, I'm watching all of those movies before I see this one, but I'm going to marathon the shit out of this. I'm going to watch them all. It's going to be great. So there is that, and I'm super excited for it. And another movie, I actually just found out this was coming out a few days ago, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Now, these are based on books that I read as a kid, and it's basically a collection of like short stories and poems and things like that. But the Scary Stories books are a big part of my childhood, and I really love those books. And if you can tell from the illustrations that you see in these things, there's a lot of like creepiness to them, and very creative, creepy looking illustrations. That's not the best picture, but where's a really good one? Yeah, this is a good one right here. And actually, the cover is just like, what the hell is that? What is that? I don't even know what that is. Is it supposed to be a clown? Like a clown skull? Old man Popeye clown skull? I don't know, but it looks great. And so those books are like burned into my memory. So if they're trying to make a movie based off of that, I think it's very interesting. What I'm hoping for is that it's legitimately scary, or at least if they go the kids movie route with it, if it's scary for kids, that would be great. Because I read these things as a kid, so I don't know if it's a kids movie or if it's an adult movie. I have no idea, but and hopefully they create visuals that kind of, you can't recapture the illustrations, but maybe you can create visuals that remind me of the illustrations. And I think that would be really neat if you were able to pull that off. Hopefully it's not just a cheaply made horror movie that they're doing and they just got the name just to kind of trick people into going to see it. I hope that's not the case, but I think I'm intrigued, to say the least. We'll know more when we start seeing trailers and stuff, but for right now it's like, all right, that's one on my radar. We'll see how it goes. Then we've got Terminator Dark Fate. Now, I am so beyond done with the Terminator franchise. Look, they should have never made another one after 2. 2 was the perfect ending. It was ambiguous enough. It was satisfying enough. It was everything that a great ending needed to be. They never needed to make another one after that. And 3 wasn't great. Genesis made me want to die. It was terrible. The best one to come out since T2, believe it or not, is Salvation, because at least it moved the story forward and beyond time-traveling robots, because that is just so played out at this point. It's like, no, guys, if you're going to keep making these movies, you got to move the story forward. You got to go forward. You can't keep going back to the same old things. And sure enough, I saw the trailer to Dark Fate, and it's time-traveling robots again, and it's the same shit. And, but they got Linda Hamilton back to play Sarah Connor. It's like, yeah, I love her. I love Linda Hamilton in that role, but I'm just not seeing anything here that could possibly interest me in another Terminator movie. And to me, it's like, it's in the same boat as like Alien or Predator. Just let it die. Stop. Just stop. Please stop. So yeah, I most likely will not be seeing Terminator Dark Fate. Just FYI. Then there's another sequel which I literally just found out about today. Zombieland Double Tap. I know nothing except they're bringing back the original cast to make a Zombieland sequel. We'll know more when the trailers come out and we start seeing stuff, but I think it's a little too late to be making a sequel to Zombieland. And again, maybe it'll turn out okay. I'm not saying it's unprecedented to wait a long time to make a sequel and then have it actually deliver. Blade Runner, great example. But preferably you'd like to make the sequel within a couple of years of the original film, because the original film is still fresh on people's minds, and you can kind of like build off the momentum of the original film. And here it's been a decade since the first Zombieland, and now we're finally getting a sequel. It's like, oh, it's a little rough, but hopefully it's good. I mean, the cool thing about Zombieland is that what set it apart from other zombie movies was the rules, like the Jesse Eisenberg character writing down the rules, and I thought that gave it a very interesting flavor and kind of dictated how the characters are supposed to interact with each other and where they follow the rules and where they break the rules and blah, 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 all that other stuff. And that's kind of neat. So I'm not upset about getting more of that. I just feel like it's like, wow, you waited a really long time to get a sequel to this, and I just hope it's good. I hope you're able to pull it off and recapture at least some of the magic. So again, we'll see when it comes out. Another sequel is another Disney sequel, Frozen 2. And I was a big fan of the first Frozen. I thought it came off really, really well. I think parents across America want to take it and burn it and they want to take every recording of Let It Go and throw it into the abyss, because it's just became every kid's favorite movie from now until eternity. But it's like, we did the same thing when Lion King came out, so I'm not going to complain too much about it. Again, I'm not opposed to a sequel, and the teaser trailer actually looked pretty good with Elsa trying to like ice walk up the waves of the ocean and couldn't do it. I'm like, all right, that's a pretty awesome teaser. But my concern is I've seen some of the Disney animated sequels that they've been doing recently. I did not like Wreck-It Ralph 2, to be perfectly honest. Toy Story 4 got me worried. Incredibles 2 was okay, but had its problems. Okay, it's half of a great movie and then half of a so-so movie, and I really would have liked more of the great elements to take over the film, because the so-so stuff really drags it down. And, yeah, I thought Wreck-It Ralph 2 was obnoxious, to be blunt. But hopefully Frozen avoids that and is actually a pretty solid movie. I mean, I would like for it to be enjoyable. I don't want to hate Disney, but, you know, if they remake everything and make bad sequels, it's going to give me, you know, it is what it is. But I haven't seen anything to convince me that Frozen 2 is going to be bad, except I'm just basing this off of history, is that Disney doesn't have a really good track record with sequels. But hopefully it's good. And that's all I'll say about that. And finally, at the end of the year, we are getting Star Wars Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. And I gotta be honest, I am not excited for this film. And the main reason is when I saw the teaser trailer that got dropped, I was like, uh-oh, they're doing what I hoped they wouldn't do, which is they're taking the negative reaction to The Last Jedi, and they're basically undoing The Last Jedi, and we're back to nostalgia fan service, where we got Lando in the film, and we got the Emperor in the film, and all this other stuff. I'm like, oh dear. And this is, the Death Star's in the film, and it's like, you're just going to remake Return of the Jedi, aren't you? And that's the impression I got from looking at that. And, of course, J.J. Abrams is back in the director's chair, and it's like, yep. And it's really a shame that the continuity from 7, 8, and 9, they don't feel like they're that connected, especially if 9 turns out the way I think it's going to turn out. It doesn't feel like a real cohesive story, because it feels like JJ did 1 with a setup, then Rian Johnson came in and completely destroyed that setup, and now JJ's trying to undo everything that Rian did and rebuild the stuff that he'd already set up in 7. And because I'll be perfectly honest, I think the Emperor's only going to be in one scene in the movie, and he's going to tell Rey that she's his granddaughter. I think that's probably where they're going to go with this, and just undo what was done in The Last Jedi. But, it feels like Disney just kind of rushed into doing these movies with Star Wars because they had all these great new toys that they could play with, and they didn't really think it out as well as they could have. And again, in my heart and in my mind, the Thrawn trilogy will always be 7, 8, and 9, and nothing that they'd come up with would have ever lived up to that. But it would be really sad if they kind of go out on a wet fart with Part 9. But then, the guys that wrote Season 8 of Game of Thrones are going to write the next set of Star Wars movies. So, yay. Oh, dear. So that concludes this really long video. Oh, it's under 2 hours. Look at that. Oh, it's under 2.5 hours. Okay. I thought I'd be rambling on for 5 hours. It's like, yeah, I got it under control, didn't I? So, thank you all for putting up with my ramblings and all of this insanity that I've delivered to you. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, but I'm going to be back to making wrestling videos. No more Godzilla videos. I'm finally wrapped up with those until Godzilla vs. Kong comes out. Then I'll have a lot to say about that. But, yeah, for right now, no more Godzilla videos. I'm good. I'm set. And I got the movie I wanted. I was happy with it, so I'm good. So, yeah, that's all I have for you here. I'm back to making wrestling videos, starting with the next entry, which should happen in maybe by the end of the week. We'll see how it goes. But for right now, that is all I have for you. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later.